Honorable members, the Secretary will read the first order of the day.
Tributes to Mr. Kofi Annan, former Secretary General of the United Nations.
Honorable the Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Honorable Landers.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, Ghana gained her independence from Britain in 1957, and without wasting time, the following year, she hosted the historic All-African People's Conference in Accra, presided over by the first president of an independent African nation, Kwame Nkrumah. Invitations were extended far and wide, and South Africa was duly represented by Askia Mphahlele, Patrick Duncan, Alfred Hutchinson, and Jordan Gubane. In that meeting, Nkrumah declared, and I quote, "The independence of Ghana was meaningless until it was linked to the independence of Africa," close quotes. Today, this South African Parliament pays homage and a special tribute to one of the greatest sons of that great country of Ghana, Kofi Annan. It is little wonder that the country of Kwame Nkrumah, the first African country to give Africa hope of the reality of freedom and independence, must be the very same country that gave the world a Kofi Annan. From the loins of a proud and colorful people with their toga dress was born a man whose hold on the strings of humanity was to be felt far and wide. It was not by dint of fate, but by a purposeful, preordained promise that he rose from the humble beginnings to capture the imaginations of mankind. The warm humility of the people of Ghana was not lost to mankind and to an impressionable lad called Kofi. The enduring compassion and regard for the true welfare of others is a hallmark that has stayed with Kofi Annan all his life. He was a product of a proud nation that has tamed iron and that has mined gold from time immemorial. A nation that is proud of its aristocracy and that is steeped in the traditions of ancient African traditional authority. Kofi Annan is a descendant of generations of Ghanaian tribal chiefs. He was born on 8 April 1938, one of twin sons of the manager of a chemical company in Ghana, who was in line to become chief of the Fante tribe. Kofi Annan was raised in the tradition of chieftaincy, and the many royal meetings in the traditional courts were an early basis of his later diplomatic upbringing. The consensus-building format of conflict resolutions was to stay with him throughout his adult life. He chose diplomacy as the best possible career at a time when many chose politics, teaching, priesthood, and the legal fraternity. His soft-spoken nature made him a natural candidate to this ancient craft because he soon realized that he was a born diplomat. His placid demeanor made him wear the diplomatic mantle with ease. His honesty and candid views encouraged even his adversaries to engage with his ideas. Kofi Annan was entrusted with greatness from the time of his birth, and when the time came, he embraced the full meaning of that natural calling to higher service of humanity. Rising through the ranks of the United Nations from the lowest position to its ultimate helm bespeaks a great feat and triumph of this genial soul. He carved a lasting niche for himself and for his continent in those gilded corridors in New York City and embosomed his name forever in its annals. Ever conscious and ever vigilant to his historic mission and compassionate about the African agenda, Kofi Annan broke down all the barriers of prejudice and race to assume and sustain the highest office of the UN with pride. Kofi Annan rose to the top of the United Nations despite all the obstacles and restrictions placed in the way of anyone coming from the developing global south. Despite his rise, He was not blinded by the laurels of office, nor was he indifferent to the struggles of the African continent and other countries of the global south, creating the space for their voices to be heard. He made it his mission to fight for the transformation of the United Nations. London's Daily Telegraph reminds us that on reform, Annan did not disappoint. He stripped 1,000 redundant posts from the United Nations and made a string of popular appointments to some of its bodies, including former Irish Prime Minister Mary Robinson as High Commissioner of the UN Human Rights Council. To seek to transform is to negate exclusion, which brings with it marginalization and discrimination. This is the incomplete agenda that South Africa will be taking up when she assumes the seat in the UN Security Council in January. We are enjoined by historical ties that bind us to continue the struggle that Kofi Annan waged for the people of Africa and the developing world. As a lasting tribute to Kofi Annan, we must struggle to reinstall multilateralism at a time when multilateralism is under serious threat. As a lasting remembrance of that great son of Africa, we must reject the notion of arbitrary conduct in the affairs of the world. Kofi Annan was a firm believer in multilateralism. Equally, he was a firm believer in the transformation of the UN global governance institutions, systems, architecture, to make them fairer to the countries of the developing South. He actively lobbied for the transformation of the Bretton Woods institutions. In his quiet, unassuming manner, he made an enormous contribution in this regard. It was under his watch that the Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs, were crafted and adopted. It was also under his watch that the UN Commission on Human Rights was transformed into a fully fledged Human Rights Council in the year 2006. Moreover, it was during his tenure that the United Nations became far more sensitive and cooperative to working with African countries to resolve African problems. For example, it is common knowledge now that SANDF troops were deployed to the DRC to assist in conflict prevention. Even after he stepped down as Secretary General, he continued to champion the cause of multilateralism, democracy, peace and stability, human rights and developments of the countries of the South. He worked tirelessly but quietly in exposing human rights abuses, resolving conflicts, and building democracy in countries like Myanmar, Kenya, and Syria. In keeping with his legacy, we must insist on consensus building and must stand firm on the principle of respect for the sanctity of humanity. We must dismiss the bullies with a united cry that power and might are not always right. As we mark the centenary of Nelson Mandela, we are reminded of the many great sons of Africa that we have shared with mankind. Thomas Gray wrote in his famous elegy written in the country churchyard, and I quote, "Full many a flower is born to blush unseen and waste its sweetness on the desert air," close quote. Kofi Annan did not blush unseen, nor did he waste his sweetness in the desert air. Alan Moorhead, in his book, The Russian Revolution, once said, and I quote, "Half measures are no good in this wilderness, any more than a leaking boat is any good in an ocean. One needs certainty, a sense of security, something to hold on to in the dangerous void, and it has to be absolutely solid," close quotes. Kofi Annan gave us that assurance that half measures are still not good in this wilderness. Humanity needs a sense of security, a sense of stability, and a sense of peace that can fill this dangerous void. Humanity dips its flag in sorrow at the loss of one of its finest sons. May his soul rest in eternal peace. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Mukhalapa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The world suffered a considerable loss with the passing of Kofi Annan on 18 August 2018. Born in Kumasi, now a city in the Ashanti region of Ghana, Annan went on to study economics, international relations, and management in Ghana, the United States, and in Geneva. When Annan joined the United Nations in 1962 as a budget officer for the World Health Organization, I doubt that anyone could have predicted the impact that the young man would go on to have within that institution. In 1992, after 30 years of climbing through the ranks of various United Nations bodies, Annan was appointed as deputy to the Undersecretary of the Department of Peacekeeping Operations. He became Undersecretary in 1993. Barely a year later, Annan would face the single greatest challenge of his career, which was genocide in Rwanda in April 1994. As South Africa today deals with its domestic issue of state capture, Annan is a poignant reminder of the power of reflective and accountable leadership. In his 2012 memoir, Annan made the argument that the United Nations Department of Peacekeeping Operations, which he led, could have done more to raise awareness to the tragedy unfolding in Rwanda and to pressure governments to provide the troops for an intervention. It was his reflections on his and the United Nations response to the Rwanda and the Serbia that ultimately led to the endorsement by the United Nations General Assembly of the doctrine of the responsibility to protect in 2005. Even as some have called these tragedies blemish on the legacy of Annan, I invite you all to today to learn instead from Kofi Annan what it means to own your failures, to take responsibility for your actions or inaction, and to remember that it is never too late to change direction or to make amends and do the right thing. In 1996, when the second-term bid of Secretary General Boutros Ghali was vetoed by the United States, Annan was the leading candidate to replace him. The start of his term on the 1st of January 1997 made him the first United Nations employee to rise to the position of Secretary General. There can be no better testament to his excellence as a thinker, a leader, as well as a smooth bureaucratic operator. The General Assembly approved his reappointment on the 29th of July, 2001. As the Secretary General, Annan worked on a number of crucial issues, ranging from the efforts to combat HIV/AIDS, especially in Africa, to launching the United Nations Global Impact and Global Compact. His skill and mastery of the United Nations system, to which he had dedicated his life, is the best seen by looking back at the reforms he introduced to the United Nations bureaucracy, and even those he fought for that he never won. Annan was a strong advocate for the expansion of the United Nations Security Council. The world has changed markedly since the formation of the United Nations, yet the institution remained frozen in the past. We as South Africa need to speak louder and more often on this issue, taking the baton from this African giant and ushering the United Nations into the future. A key reform attributable to Annan's legacy within the United Nations is the formation of the United Nations Human Rights Council in March 2006. Annan believed strongly in the importance of the credibility of human rights apparatus of the United Nations. While the Human Rights Council has somewhat addressed some of the challenges of its predecessors, more reform is still needed to repair its stature and its credibility amongst the nations of the United Nations. Here too, South Africa must urgently course correct our position on human rights issues if are worthy to be carrying the mandate and the mantle of Kofi Annan. Annan repeatedly encouraged African leaders to uphold the electoral integrity based on the principles of universal suffrage and political equality, and adherence to international norms, standards, and agreements. He contributed to conflict resolutions in Africa through transitional justice measures, both that are judicial and non-judicial, in order to obtain peace and nation building and to ensure accountability. It was in recognition of the magnitude of his contribution to the United Nations that the Nobel Committee awarded the Nobel Peace Prize to the United Nations, together with Kofi Annan in his personal capacity in 2001. Annan rested neither on his Nobel laurels nor his United Nations achievements after the end of his second term. Instead, he went on to serve the world through the establishment of the Kofi Annan Foundation and as chair of the prestigious collective called the Elders, established by our renowned Nelson Mandela in 2007 to work together on peace and human rights. Annan lent his leadership and his experience to peace efforts all over the world, including in Kenya, Syria, and Myanmar. The Advisory Commission on Rakhine State, led by Kofi Annan, released its report just over 1 year ago, and Annan died at the age of 80, having poured his life out in service to humanity and human rights until the end. A reflection on his life is more than a meditation on his failures and successes. It is instead a clarion call for each and every one of us to consider the ways in which we can daily, increasingly devote ourselves to our fellow men. We must strive to give of ourselves to our own countries and communities and families with the dedication and commitment that Kofi Annan has given to each and every one of us. A son of the African soil, a gallant hero of African global excellence and optimism. And on behalf of the Democratic Alliance, we extend our deepest condolences. May his soul find eternal rest and peace. Asante sana. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Mente.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. The economic freedom fighters is saddened by the untimely departure of Mr. Kofi Annan, the second Secretary General of the United Nations who was from the African continent. His election as the seventh Secretary General of the UN was unique in a sense that he was the first UN Secretary General who previously worked as a staff member of this global body. His tenure was during a particularly difficult period where the UN as a body was constantly undermined by both the US and Britain, who used their power to force through an ill-conceived war of terror. Unfortunately, this period exposed the uselessness of the UN when faced with the power of immoral and greedy global power mongers who use their military might to bully other nations into submission. This was the only sad aspect of Mr. Annan's legacy at the UN. While he was still an official there, he was in charge of peacekeeping at the UN in 1994 when the genocide in Rwanda happened, and he did nothing until over 500,000 people were massacred to death, which he regretted greatly. To his credit, however, he learned from these mistakes and tried to make the UN more interventionist on national matters where human rights are being abused. As an African, he was an astute diplomat who traversed the complicated terrain of global politics with dignity and acumen. We honor him for continuing to agitate for a more peaceful society, even after he stepped down from the UN. Africa and the rest of humanity has lost an authoritative moral compass, and we may never recover from losing these leaders. May his soul rest in peace, and may his family be comforted in the knowledge that Mr. Annan lived his life to the fullest and left the world much better than he found it. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Shenge.
Honorable Deputy Speaker and honorable members, the news of Mr. Kofi Annan's passing sent a wave of distress throughout the global community. When a great leader passes so unexpectedly and before their time, we come face to face with the reality that life is fragile and unpredictable. Mr. Annan knew this. He had an enormous capacity for empathy and was deeply concerned by the suffering of so many due to poverty. From the heights of the United Nations, he maintained his connection with ordinary men and women, for it was these, in fact, whom he sought to serve. On behalf of the IFP, I've already expressed our condolences to Mrs. Nane Annan and the children. Today, I extend our condolences to all who have grieved this loss. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity, Deputy Speaker, to see Mr. Annan again just a few weeks ago when I joined the elders for the commemoration of 100 years since the birth of former President Nelson Mandela. At the invitation of Gracia Machel, we opened the 100 Sparks of Hope Peace Park. Mr. Annan seemed quite well, and none of us could have imagined that this would be his last visit to South Africa. In fact, I last saw him at the airport and waved to each other as the car was ferrying him to his plane. Like so many over the years, I've quoted Mr. Annan many times, for I admired his wisdom. In 2013, when I responded in this House to the State of the Nation address, I reminded us of Mr. Annan's warning on the increasing damage being done by corruption. He said, and I quote him, "Corruption hurts the poor disproportionately by diverting funds intended for development, undermining a government's ability to provide basic services, feeding inequality and injustice, and discouraging foreign aid and investment. Corruption is a key element in economic underperformance and a major obstacle to poverty alleviation and development," unquote. Colleagues, we must take these words to heart as we serve our country. We'll remember Mr. Annan's leadership. His life's contribution to the alleviation of poverty and suffering changed millions of lives for good. His legacy is vast and will remain in our hearts and our lips for years to come. Today, I recall with satisfaction that Mr. Annan was the first African Nobel Peace Laureate born outside of South Africa. Our leaders blazed a trail for this continent, starting with our leader, Inkosi Albert Luchuli. May we continue to blaze a trail now in memory of this great son of Africa.
Thank you. Honorable Kubisa.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the National Freedom Party, understand that tribute to this giant and a gentle colossus of Africa reminds us that we stand on the shoulders of our heroes and heroines who went on an extra mile to shape Africa and the world for the better. This tribute reminds us that certain chapters cannot be easily closed. The life, the role, and the memories of the erudite Kofi Annan tell a story of an icon who, through word, character, and deed, impacted the nations of the world. Kofi Annan revitalized the United Nations organization and made the international systems effective. He was an advocate of the rule of law, a human rights activist, and he contributed to the Millennium Development Goals and Africa. And he worked tirelessly to bring the organization closer to the people, forging ties with civil society, the private sector, and partners. He strengthened the UN peacekeeping missions, and during his tenure in 2005, member states established the Peacekeeping Commission and the Human Rights Council. He created a global fund for HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. And during his tenure as Secretary General of the UN, he came up with a counter-terrorism strategy and crafted a strategy to combat terrorism and caused member states to adopt a responsibility to protect the peoples of the world against genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and other crimes against humanity. Kofi Annan worked for the entire world. He was a true, astute Democrat and diplomat. Like Kwame Nkrumah, Dr. P.C. Isaka Seme, our own Dr. Mandela, and others, he was a true African and a true humanitarian. In 1998, he helped towards a smooth transition to civilian rule in Nigeria. He resolved the impasse between Iraq and the Security Council on compliance of a resolution involving weapons and inspection of other matters. He was not just a pen and paper SG of the UN, but he was always on the road, traveling and trotting the globe to speak peace and the respect of human rights. He was very erudite. He had a master's degree in management. He rose from the very beginnings from among traditional leaders to become an eminent leader. And he also intervened to ensure the cessation of hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah, and urged Israel to withdraw from Lebanon. On behalf of the NFP, we say, may his soul rest in peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Kwankwa.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, honorable members, fellow South Africans. I rise to associate the United Democratic Movement with the tributes which have been paid to the late former Secretary General of the United Nations, Tata Kofi Annan. Born in Kumasi in the then British Gold Coast in 1938, Tata Annan was in every real sense a child of Africa and a product of our beloved continent. During his time as the United Nations Secretary General, Tata Annan worked hard to institute institutional reforms that would turn the UN into a credible multilateral institution. An ardent champion of peace and fundamental human rights activist, with great equanimity, he tackled global challenges with enthusiasm and persistence in the face of daunting challenges. Who can forget how disappointed he was when the US invaded Iraq in 2003 without the approval of the United Nations Security Council? Even then, US unilateralism was unmerited. Tata Annan, utterly embarrassed and deflated by the arrogance of the US, carried himself with dignity and integrity. Remarkably, he showed no residue of bitterness, although the actions of the US undermined his leadership. In Tata Annan, we have lost a son of Africa whose light shone like a beacon in a dark continent. He dedicated his life to the attainment of the Pan-African vision of building an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa. In line with NEPAD and Agenda 2063, he worked tirelessly to build a peaceful and secure Africa, an Africa of good governance, democracy, and respect for fundamental human rights. Nowhere was this more evident than in the mediation efforts and elsewhere, such as the role he played in brokering a peace deal between former President Mwai Kibaki and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga that ended the post-election violence in Kenya in 2008. I can also vividly recall the instrumental role he played in the peace-building process in the Democratic Republic of Congo, both before and after the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 1234, which led to the signing of the Lusaka ceasefire agreement on 10 July 1999. Given his many contributions to building a better world, it is therefore no doubt in our mind that Tata Annan saw himself as an instrument for global freedom, for global peace, for human life against tyranny and human rights. As young parliamentarians who continue to promote democracy on the continent, we draw inspiration from leaders such as Tata Annan. As we bid farewell to you, Tata Annan, we want to give you assurance that we'll continue to emulate your good example, that we will pick up the spear and continue to fight for building a better world, and more importantly, for the renewal of Africa. May your soul rest in peace. Siyabulela, Tata.
Thank you. Honorable Lekota.
Deputy Speaker and members of the House, the office of the Secretary General of the United Nations has been described as the most impossible.
Order, honorable members. Proceed, honorable member.
The office of the Secretary General of the United Nations has been described as the most impossible job in the world, and that the initials SG stand for scapegoat, particularly in times of global strife and conflict. The Secretary General of the United Nations is a symbol of the organization's ideals and a spokesperson for the interests of the world's people, nations, and in particular the poor and the rich. History will count Kofi Annan as one of the most outstanding incumbents of that office. He displayed ethical, principled, modest, forthright, and honest leadership. Annan was also a change agent. He used his power for good. At the time when AIDS denialism was at its highest, Annan helped break it and placed the matter and the then high cost of life-saving ARVs on the global agenda. Annan was also played an important role in ensuring the adoption of the Rome Statutes, which resulted in the establishment of the International Criminal Court. Fellow Nobel Peace Prize winner and fellow member of the elders, Desmond Tutu, has had this to say about him, quote, "The fact that Annan was a product of Africa did us especially proud, but he could not be defined by his Africanness. He embodied the global citizen. For him, there was no them, no other, just us." The Congress of the People pays tribute to this African, this global citizen, and one of us, and hopes that our country can return to the ethical and selfless leadership and governance espoused by Annan, and that we will promote, protect global statutes and institutions such as the Rome Statutes and the International Criminal Court, established during his tenure as SG of the United Nations. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you. Honorable Mishra.
Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the ACDP, I want to pay tribute to this great African leader and diplomat, Kofi Annan, and offer our sincere condolences to his family, friends, and the global community he has served over the years. According to the Annan family, Mr. Annan, who was 80 years old, passed away peacefully after a short illness, and that his home country, Ghana, declared a week of national mourning in his honor. Mr. Annan served 2 terms as UN chief from 1997 to 2006 and was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for his humanitarian work. He later served as the UN Special Envoy for Syria, leading efforts to find a solution to the conflict. During his tenure, the ACDP did not always agree with the decisions he made, but we always appreciated the enormity of his task and the complex nature of the issues that rested on his shoulders. And we know that where there was suffering or need, he would reach out with compassion. Kofi Annan has described his greatest achievement as the Millennium Development Goals, which, for the first time, set global targets on issues such as poverty and child mortality. Like all great leaders, Mr. Annan had his critics and was blamed for the UN's failure to halt the genocide in Rwanda in the 1990s while he was head of the UN peacekeeping operation. He did, however, gain great respect for drawing attention to conflicts in many other parts of the world and the plight of those caught up in war, natural disasters, and extreme poverty. In 2007, Mr. Annan set up his own foundation aimed at promoting global sustainable development, security, and peace. He also successfully helped negotiate a power-sharing deal to end post-election violence in Kenya. In a Facebook tribute, Raila Odinga, the opposition leader who signed the agreement, referred to Annan as, in quote, the man who stepped in and saved the country from collapse, close quote. In 2012, Mr. Annan was made chair of the Elders, a peace and human rights advocacy group started by the late Tata Mandela. Mr. Annan had a way of quietly but firmly reminding world leaders that they needed to put their duty to their citizens above their political agendas. We can all learn from his caution and example in this regard. Ms. Annan's legacy and contribution to our world will not be forgotten very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Njaiso.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. The former General Secretary of the UN, Kofi Annan, contributed a lot to the elevation of Africa to the world map. He was both an African and a global icon. He has left an indelible impact on both Africa and the world. He was a man of peace and love and a true African. He worked for world peace and would aspire that all countries should have good understanding of one another. Like the songbird Aretha Franklin, Kofi Annan will never or will always be remembered for his good work for Africa and for the world. He was a great friend of Madiba and was very much active in the group that was founded by Madiba known as the Group of Elders. He was very much active in this group, and this group was serving as a mediator in the political establishment in local and international. His passing away is a great loss to the Organization of African Unity and the world. He will also be remembered for his progressive insinuated indifference policy stance. His pan-Africanist demeanor contributed towards the adoption of the African Union vision. He committed his life to security, human rights, and the rule of law. One of his achievements was the silent strength in mediating in the violent conflict in Sudan. He always wanted to better the lives of other people, putting the people first. He once remarked, quote, anyone who speaks forcefully for human rights and does nothing about human security and development, or vice versa, undermines both his credibility and his cause, unquote. The African and global challenges left unsolved should be done by the people left behind that has learned a lot from him. He was a good ambassador for Africa, coming from Ghana, the first country that gained independence. If there's any life after death, Kofi Annan will continue living and doing his good work. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Masango.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, honorable members, fellow South Africans, the glorious movement of our people, the ANC, on the 18th August 2018, woke up to a fateful reality that the cruel jaws of death have snuffed out the precious life of one of the outstanding giants of peace diplomacy, quiet diplomacy, and development diplomacy, Mr. Kofi Annan. The ANC lowers its banners in the fond memory of this intellectual doyen from the African soil, born in 1938. In 1996, Kofi Annan assumed the reins of the UN Secretary General, being the first Black African Secretary General from Sub-Saharan Africa. As honorable members would be aptly aware, Annan would not just be remembered for his pragmatic diplomatic maneuvers, but also for his profound and cogent insights into the ever-changing political dynamics of the world, East, South, and North. What is appreciated by the ANC is that with regard to peace diplomacy, peacemaking, and mediation in conflict and post-conflict society, Annan made an indelible contribution. In this regard, Annan ensured that the UN supports peacekeeping missions and that the UN supports the disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration initiatives. For him, peace would be possible if only armed rebels are demobilized and disarmed. As a peacemaker, he wanted to see terrorism, civil wars, and conflicts such as those in Burundi, DRC, Somalia, Syria, etc., speedily ended. Like most of us, he expressed his shock and unreserved aversion to the invasion of Iraq in 2003 by the United States of America, especially because it was carried out outside the mandate of the UN. Like us, he wanted respect for the sanctity of the multilateral approach to the world problems through the UNO. As a champion of the African agenda, the African Renaissance, and NEPAD, the ANC saw in Annan a dependable ally because he understood that the continent's leadership and its civil societies needed to work together for the socio-economic reconstruction of the African continent. Annan will be remembered as a great gender activist, diplomat, and to this he masterfully asserted, I quote, "Africa's women have borne the brunt of caring for the young, the old, the sick, and the dying," unquote. And he continued, I quote, "In the United Nations family, we have always known that our work for development depends on a successful partnership with the African farmer and her husband." In Kofi Annan, the broad liberation movement and the world have lost a warrior for democracy, good governance, and respect for human rights. He was an advocate and a strong believer in the universal values of equality, tolerance, human dignity, and reconciliation. His yearn for a humane, caring, and equitable world order was always manifest in his speeches and interventions. Annan always wanted to bring the UN closer to the people by reaching out to new partners and thereby restore public confidence in the organization. He played a significant role in the establishment of the Peace Building Commission and the Human Rights Council in 2006. He also played an instrumental role in the creation of the global funds to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. In this sense, his seminal contribution to the well-being of humanity will be sadly missed. As part of the collective of eminent persons formed by President Mandela, the Elders, Annan remained a point of reference. The ANC has always attached importance to the Elders to pursue quiet diplomacy between conflicting parties and other belligerents because skillful persuasion is a great weapon of diplomacy. The ANC notes with a profound sense of pride that Annan was not only an outstanding intellectual and scholar, but also a richly decorated personality with 18 awards, the Chancellorship of the University of Ghana, including a Nobel Peace Prize conferred on him, and the UN for their work for a better organized and more peaceful world. Yet he remained a humble man of the people around the UN, his home country and the world. Farewell, Annan, as you join Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, Oliver Tambo, Abdel Nasser, Mandela, Dr. Martin Luther King, and others. The ANC and the rest of the democratic movement joins the rest of humanity in conveying a message of condolences to his family, friends, and colleagues. May his soul rest in perfect peace. Hamba kahle qhawe le Africa. Ngiyathokoza, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable members, that concludes the tributes. Will members please rise to observe a moment of silence in memory of the late Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the United Nations. Thank you. You may be seated. Although condolences of the House have been conveyed to the Annan family, we will convey these tributes as well. Honorable members, the next item on the order paper is a subject for discussion in the name of Honorable Holomisa on working towards an integrated and comprehensive infrastructure development strategy to fight poverty, inequality, unemployment, and underdevelopment. Honorable Bantu Holomisa.
Honorable Deputy Speaker and honorable members, South Africa, like many other so-called developing nations, faces challenges of chronic underdevelopment and or development skewed towards urban areas, albeit in an unequal manner. Even urban development is fraught with inequality, as some provinces are in a position to deliver better infrastructure, while others trail behind owing to fiscal constraints determined by the income levels of their households. Yes, some progress has been made since 1994 to provide services and infrastructure in areas where it was taboo to do so in the apartheid years. However, it is simply not sufficient or sustainable, and some of it not built well enough and is out of date with modern innovations. South Africa has been in economic stagnation for more than a decade now, but mostly due to sluggish investment, poor governance, and chronic corruption. We have experienced 2 quarters of negative growth this year, thus the current technical recession. Deputy Speaker, if we were to unite around this new approach on infrastructure development in our country, we shall be in practice marching united towards drastically reducing inequality, the eradication of poverty and unemployment. The UDM believes in a policy of intervention by the state in the economy through planned sustainable development programs, which create jobs on a large scale whilst developing and maintaining infrastructure. There is, however, a serious lack of capacity, uniformity in spatial planning and infrastructure development between municipal, provincial, and national government. The introduction of mega infrastructure should not be done at the expense of the development of rural areas, townships, and informal settlement. Mega infrastructure must be linked and inclusive to these areas for their benefit. In this regard, the UDM, with its integrated policy approach, proposes that the work of the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Committee or Commission must be locally driven from grassroots level. For instance, we need to have a comprehensive ward, municipal, district, and provincial-based infrastructure plan that will be coordinated at the central level by the PICC. We need to build internal capacity to restrict unnecessary dependence on outsourcing. The PICC must be able to ensure that the state has the necessary capacity at local levels. Government needs to plan infrastructure beforehand and ensure that their investment in education aligns with the infrastructure development goals to avoid having the sector being dominated by foreign experts. The PICC could also be tasked to ensure uniformity of infrastructure development across provinces as guided by their individual needs. In so doing, one province will not be favored over another. For instance, primary schools across all provinces must have equal access to computer and science laboratories. Each worker should have the same access to transport to get them to and from work. Each citizen living in a rural area should have the same opportunity to benefit from the infrastructure and public service made available in urban hubs as far as reasonably possible. South Africa is currently engaged in the land debate, and the PICC could play a pivotal role in the implementation and monitoring of a future land dispensation, which includes the necessary infrastructure development. We cannot offer citizens access to land that they desperately need and deserve without in turn providing them with the infrastructure they need to maximize that potential. For the PICC to succeed, the UDM suggests that we draw on the invaluable expertise that South Africans possess in all spheres, in all sectors. Our public transport system leaves much to be desired, and an over-reliance coupled with lack of maintenance on our road infrastructure has led to its rapid decay. Government must do more, and the UDM wishes to propose intercity high-speed rail. This is possible via the refurbishment and adaptation of the existing railway lines and building additional capacity where needed. It is said that all roads lead to the proverbial Rome, but in South Africa, maybe all roads and rails should lead to Gauteng and other hubs to provide an alternative for South Africans from the four corners of our country to travel to and from our economic centers in a safe, affordable, and speedy way. A high-speed railway system would, amongst others, have the following advantages. One, the reduction of people dying in road accidents at a high rate, greater access to specialized services, for example, courts, legislatures, hospitals with medical specialists, and universities, etc., will be more accessible. Three, our roads will be taxed less by heavy vehicles that damage road surfaces. Most importantly, the reduced dependence on road transport will have the spin-offs of speeding up the economy. For example, business could be located anywhere and transport their goods with ease and at a relatively low cost. Our citizens will not have to face a choice between pursuing their careers and moving away from their families and loved ones. Business could employ people from far-reaching places, thus spreading wealth to rural areas. New business opportunities can be identified where it was previously deemed too remote. Our lucrative tourism industry could be further unlocked, not only for international tourism, but also local tourism. Of course, such development costs money. However, in our case, it is not necessarily a lack of money. Private sector has the resources we need, but are reluctant to invest in corruption. Even public sector, for instance, the pension funds can be best used to fund this new approach to infrastructure development. It would be irrational to disagree that a new approach to infrastructure development must place a high value in our environment. This is especially applicable when considering our pristine natural resources. Furthermore, any infrastructure development must be done in consultation with affected communities. For instance, as part of a rural infrastructure development program, communities should identify which areas should be used for grazing and planting and which should be left fallow. Government must then take responsibility for fencing off land which will in turn generate local jobs. Lastly, 28% of Southern Africa's water flows unused through the Eastern Cape rivers. Using this water effectively and responsibly could generate jobs in the short and long term. Also, some of the richest agricultural soil in the country lies uncultivated in this province. We need to ensure that our infrastructure is advancing industrialization, environmental preservation, and social cohesion. In more ways than one, we need to ensure that South Africa and South Africans are no longer left behind, but at the helm of their developmental trajectory. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable the Deputy Minister of Economic Development, Madala Masuku.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker, honorable members, and the people of South Africa. I want to agree with you, General, that infrastructure plays a very critical role in the stimulation of our economy. And if I had time, I would have gone miles in theory, practice, and experience. However, today, I would like to do so, and safe to say that I want to indicate that in 2014, 2016, 17, we have seen this as an example when approximately in our program for infrastructure gave us 860 billion that was invested, and within 3 years, and created 784,000 jobs per annum, and stimulated an average contribution of 280 billion to the annual GDP growth at that time. And it has helped us to avoid what we are afraid of the recession in 2015. And we believe that if you go on and putting more investment in the infrastructure, we are going to be able to also avert the current recession that we are having. I also want to agree with you with all the aspects that you have actually raised, and I don't think that I can disagree with you. It has actually confirmed the root of where you are coming from. You are really still a cadre of the ANC. The topic that we have decided to give us today, working towards an integrated and comprehensive infrastructure development strategy to fight poverty, inequality, and unemployment and underdevelopment, is more relevant as we ponder the future. It is a critical topic given the past apartheid era that we're coming from, which has unimaginably done harm in the perpetuation of poverty, inequality, unemployment, and underdevelopment in our country. The topic call on us to consider and deliberate a deliberated, well-coordinated, integrated planning and implementation of infrastructure that will have impact on poverty reduction, reducing inequalities, creating jobs, and stimulate employment. It appears, General, that this was a well-thought topic indeed, based on lessons drawn from progress we have made since the dawn of democracy, while enjoying the benefit of hindsight. I hear the topic as saying there are things that we did well, and I heard you saying so, and those that we can improve drastically to realize better outcome. It also recognized a need for greater synergy to be established within and across spheres of government to ensure our better outcomes. And in this respect, improved coordination of our efforts between public sector, the public, the private sector and civil society can also add value to this effort. As we grapple with our apartheid spatial planning legacies of the past, in the last 20 years of democracy, you are right, General, that we have initiated a number of interventions at the national and provincial and local spheres. Therefore, to respond to this topic appropriately, we need to reflect on these initiatives with an eye to evaluate the impact they made, laying the foundation for future development planning and implementation. It must be noted and credited that in the past 20 years, legislations and policies were reviewed and new ones were put in place to ensure government programs serve the interests of every South Africans equitably, while accelerating transformation of South African society as a whole. These policies, amongst others, included the adoption of the very constitution that defined the role of each sphere of government, which was followed by an Intergovernmental Relations Act that established framework for cooperative governments. At a local sphere, a Local Government Act was passed that enabled adoption of community participative integrated development planning process, which requires integration of upper spheres efforts for the success of local integrated plans. For the IDP to be complete, it has to have as an annexer a local economic development plan and a municipal-based infrastructure development plan that integrates national efforts and provincial efforts informed by a land use special plan over the project that must be overlaid. We therefore agree with you, General, that special development plans are very important and they can actually be able to discipline us in terms of use of our land. In order to facilitate the above, a bouquet of infrastructure grants and national supportive programs were developed. They included municipal infrastructure grant, regional and bulk water infrastructures, amongst others. The examples of infrastructure programs included intermodal transport programs and integrated human settlement plans, to name a few. All these were meant to strengthen infrastructure delivery plan that should assist us to meet our goal of developing our communities, eradicate poverty and unemployment and inequalities. I hear the topic asking us if it is not yet time to consolidate all these initiatives into one integrated and comprehensive infrastructure development strategy that we are reflecting on today. At a national level, other nationwide initiatives were also considered. Amongst them, the National Spatial Planning Framework, Integrated Urban Development Framework, and other related plans that were developed in order to channel development resources more effectively and more efficiently and effectively. The initial spatial planning framework resulted in an identification of deliberately planned spatial development infrastructure projects that were meant to stimulate integrated socio-economic programs aimed at anchoring the local spatial development projects and programs. Through the above plans, we have seen a number of revitalization projects such as the N4 Maputo-Walvis Bay Development Corridor Expansion, N2 Gateway, N1 Expansion, Kuha Development Initiatives, which today we're benefiting on. Learning out of this initiative, we have seen some local municipalities replicating similar kind of approaches in their development. A case in point, being the Greater Johannesburg during the time of Mayor Masondo, which came up with a special development framework that have since Soweto completely transformed into a more sustainable human settlement, barring the limitation imposed by apartheid planning of our past. This is a special plan that included a program of urban renewal, the program that I see the current Mayor Mashaba of Greater Johannesburg is prioritizing. We also have seen resources deployed towards establishing industrial development zones, which are today playing a critical role in our economy. Learning from the lessons of South Africa's built programs, such as the 2010 World Cup stadiums, constructing King Shaka International Airport, power stations, and Gautrain. In 2012, South Africa adopted a national infrastructure plan intended to transform economic landscape while dealing with the evils of poverty, inequality, and unemployment, and underdevelopment. This is a national infrastructure plan that gave birth to the PICC that, General, we have made recommendations that should actually, on areas that should actually focus on. The plan was done after a spatial mapping exercise was undertaken that identify key gaps and opportunities in the analysis of existing infrastructure, identifying newly required infrastructure for addressing basic needs and unlocking economic opportunities. The plan entailed 18 strategic integrated projects, consolidated 150 individual infrastructure plans across provinces into a coherent package. The SIPs comprise of 5 geographical focus SIPs, 3 special SIPs, 3 energy, 3 on social infrastructure, 2 on knowledge, 1 on water and sanitation, and 1 on regional integration. These special plans, these programs, were an attempt to address the issues that are raised by the topic today. So through this plan, we've seen rechanneling of resources and energies towards infrastructure delivery, and by the end of the financial year 2017-18, indicated that among the spending on infrastructure, it aggregated to an equivalence of 1 billion rand a day. As a result, and this resulted into the building of 890 schools in 6 years, 2 new universities, 19 hospitals, revamped 296 clinics, and just above 1 million of houses constructed and 2 million households electrified. 2 of the big power stations have been built as a result of this program, resulting in the increase in energy, in green energy project that has added about 110,000 megawatt of electricity to the national grid, serving us from the albatross of load shedding that was affecting us countrywide. Typical of a well-planned integrated project is Bushbuck Ridge Water Scheme, which included dams and included treatment plants, regional storages, reticulation storages that will soon make municipality water challenges an issue of the past in that municipality. Another illustration of an integrated approach is the Eastern Cape case, where we all were complaining about the slow delivery of schools. And through our CD programs, which was an integrated approach, we have seen 149 schools built in that area. What lessons then did we learn out of this? We are learning that comprehensively planned integrated infrastructure development strategies can have stimulate economy, create employment, reduce poverty, accelerate development, address class and geographical divide, close gap between rural and urban divide, and address colonial and apartheid divide. However, comprehensive and integrated infrastructure strategy is not a panacea for every social problem. It has got its own challenges. Comprehensive projects over years have proven to be havens of corruption, collusions, looting and state capture. And that is why, the reason why that President Ramaphosa emphasizes integrity and zero tolerance to corruption in his vision for the future South Africa. This vision also emphasizes a need to build capable institutions accompanied by strong, accountable systems, both in public and private sector, to insulate public from corrupt elements and looters. Comprehensive planned integrated infrastructure must be able to trigger industrialization, and it therefore must be accompanied by policy of localization that will stimulate proliferation of small and household industries. Special projects also are ideological, and we need to be able to pay attention to that. A strong, capable state is critical for proper planning and project contracting for infrastructure rollout. Otherwise, you end up with project of inflected project and prolonged delivery timelines as experienced in the public in the project, including the energy ones. A comprehensive integrated infrastructure, in conclusion, linked to goal of eradicating poverty and inequality, ending unemployment acceleration, is a critical requirement. What we need to do is to close the gap identified in the implementation in our various projections in the past 20 years, and also integrate various strategies. Thank you very much, Honorable.
Thank you. Honorable DJ Menir.
Deputy Speaker, during his first State of the Nation address on the 16th of February 2018, President Cyril Ramaphosa spoke of renewal, of revitalization, and of progress, and announced a new path of economic growth, of employment, and of transformation in South Africa. However, we must now face the fact that within just 6 months, the new path of economic growth, of employment, and of transformation is dead in South Africa. We are now in deep economic trouble, with the economy in recession and with 9.6 million people who do not have jobs or who have given up looking for jobs, and who live without dignity, without independence, and without freedom in South Africa. We heard this week that the economy contracted by 0.7% in the second quarter, following a contraction of 2.6% in the first quarter of this year, which means that the economy has now slipped into recession. We heard that fixed investment had decreased by 0.5% and that household consumption expenditure had decreased by 1.3% in the second quarter of 2018. Well, that should come as no surprise, because despite all the talk about infrastructure-led growth, spending on infrastructure, which contributes to economic growth and job creation, has actually been cut by a staggering 46.6 billion rand in 2017-18, by 48.3 billion rand in 2018-19, and by 43.8 billion rand in 2019-20. And that ordinary people are now experiencing an income squeeze, largely as a result of an increase in value-added tax, which translates for example, into an average annual cost to the poorest households of about 105 Rand per year. In the end, what all this means is that ordinary people who are battling to make ends meet and who are battling to put bread on the table are now worse off in South Africa. What we expected was a recession-fighting plan, but what we got from President Cyril Ramaphosa was silence. From the Minister of Finance, Nhlanhla, was surprise. What we got from the Minister of Economic Development, Ibrahim Mattel, was to blame the drought. And what we got from the ANC's economic policy czar, Enoch Godongwana, was to blame former President Jacob Zuma. In fact, the finance minister was caught off guard in, you guessed it, in China, where he was caught mumbling that the recession was, and I quote, entirely surprising, because we did not think we will have a second contraction, and we were hoping for a moderate recovery. Well, the fact is that despite all the talk about a new path, about economic growth, about employment, and about transformation, President Cyril Ramaphosa is a man without a plan when it comes to fixing the economy in South Africa. His approach on the economy is a toxic mix of a much spoken about but little seen stimulus package designed to ignite economic growth and create jobs, a series of much spoken about but little seen summits and conferences, including a jobs summit and an investment conference, and a series of reckless economic policy proposals, including the formation of state banks, land expropriation without compensation, and the nationalization of the Reserve Bank, which in the end, of course, are actually not designed to fix the economy, but are designed to maintain unity with an increasingly divided ANC-SACP COSATU alliance, and to co-opt radical opposition parties who support reckless economic policies such as the formation of state banks, land expropriation without compensation, and the nationalization of the Reserve Bank. We are in deep economic trouble because President Cyril Ramaphosa is more committed to fixing the politics and consolidating his own political power ahead of the general election than he is to fixing the economics in South Africa. We must now face the fact that the biggest roadblock to fixing this economy is President Cyril Ramaphosa, who is too scared to decide because he is too scared to divide an increasingly fractured ANC-SACP COSATU alliance. We should never forget that he was effectively hired by the most dangerous man in politics, Deputy President David Mabuza, and he can be fired by Deputy President David Mabuza, who actually has power within the governing party of South
Deputy Speaker.
Yes, honourable member.
Point of order.
Munir, please
The
take
principle is members must refer to each other in an acceptable parliamentary manner. It cannot be acceptable at all. And Honourable Mainir has got to withdraw referring to the Deputy President as the most dangerous what man, like he has done openly on record. We call on him to retract to that, Honourable Deputy Speaker.
Deputy Speaker.
Honourable member.
Deputy Speaker, with respect, there are various types of danger, and people are politically dangerous. And I don't think that it's unparliamentary. And I think that Honourable Main has asked to withdraw that.
But
it's a refraction on his debate.
Yes, but Honourable Steenhuisen, please, man, as a matter of practice, you must wait until I respond to the point of order raised. It's appropriate that you wait until I decide on that matter. I will come back to this matter now. Proceed, Honourable Member. I will come back to rule on this matter. Yes.
Thank you,
Proceed.
Speaker. I'd like to remind the honourable member that I in fact referred to Deputy President David Mabuza as the most dangerous man in politics, not the most dangerous what man. Deputy Speaker, whatever the case, in the end, it is the politics that is killing
Honourable
the
Deputy Speaker.
economics in South Africa.
Honourable member.
Honourable Deputy Speaker.
Yes, honourable member.
The honourable member, I'm rising on rule number 84, unparliamentary words. The honourable member is repeating what he knows very well that is unparliamentary, and he adds on that he ran away for vetting.
Honourable Menir, is that what you said? Is that
Speaker,
what you said, honourable member?
What, Speaker?
Honourable member says you said the deputy president ran away from what?
Deputy Speaker.
I'm asking Honourable Menir. Take your seat, Honourable
I'm his chief whip.
No.
Deputy
I know you're chief whip. Let me ask Honourable Menir. No, you can't be screaming at me or the House. Take your Honourable Menir. Did you say that? Honourable Menir.
Deputy Speaker, would you just be clear? What are you?
I have told you what I heard. Just answer the question, Honourable Menir. I told you what I said.
What question would you like me to answer, Deputy Speaker?
Honourable Menir, I've just spoke to you. The honourable member spoke to you. I have repeated what she said. Did you say that or not?
Well, the problem here, Deputy Speaker, is would somebody speak to me? You speaking to the honourable member speaking to you. Would somebody have the courtesy to speak to me?
Deputy Speaker.
Honourable Menir.
Deputy Speaker, may I clarify?
No, Honourable Station, let me finish this conversation. I'll come to you. Honourable Menir, you are playing around. Can you respond to the questions? Just answer the question, Honourable Menir. You are an adult.
Would you please put the question?
I have asked you. I'm not repeating it.
Deputy Speaker.
I repeated what the honourable member said to you, Honourable Minister.
Deputy Speaker.
I will not take your point, Honourable Steenhuisen, because I'm in the process of discussing with a member on the podium who has capacity to speak.
I'm trying to assist the process, Deputy.
No, I don't need assistance right now.
You
Please.
actually do.
I don't need it.
You need professional.
Take your seat, Honourable
you need
member.
professional assistance.
Take your seat, Honourable member. You are unable to be professional yourself in the first place. Completely unable. Just keep quiet. Just cool your heels. Just cool your heels.
Honourable Deputy Speaker.
Honourable Menir, respond to a question that was raised to you, which I repeated to you. I'm not
Deputy
repeating
Speaker,
it.
since I'm unsure what question you're putting to me, my answer to your question is I'm unsure.
Honourable member, Honourable member Dubazan, raise what you raised. I want to finalize this.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I rise on rule number 84. Unparliamentary words. Honourable member on the podium firstly repeatedly said that the deputy president is the most dangerous in politics. And he further said on the second, repeated it. And he said, adding on that, he said, ran away for vetting. And that is unparliamentary. He's actually endorsing that the deputy president is dangerous, the most dangerous.
Deputy
That's
Speaker.
why he's supposed to do.
Take your seat, Honourable member.
Deputy
Yes,
Speaker.
Honourable Menir, respond.
Deputy Speaker, I said that Deputy President David Mabuza was the most dangerous man in politics, but I did not say that he ran away from vetting.
Okay.
Deputy
All right,
Speaker.
that's enough.
Deputy
That's
Speaker.
enough. Yes. Yes,
May you
Honourable
hear me
member.
now finally? Talk. The problem here, Deputy Speaker, is that you should have asked the honourable member there to repeat what she said, because she actually caused the problem. She accused the Honourable David Mayneer of running away from vetting, which she should withdraw. Instead, you've now harassed and harangued a member of the House. If you had listened properly, you would have maybe heard what she said. She should withdraw.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, on a point of order.
Honourable members. Yes, honourable member.
Honourable Deputy Speaker.
Yes.
There is no member of this House who will be referred to as the most dangerous in politics. If that is the case, Honourable Deputy Speaker, the people who run away from vetting, from the polygraphy, those are the most dangerous people. That is Manir. He is the most dangerous person because he ran away from vetting. We cannot be insulted by them and not say anything about it, Deputy Speaker. Honourable Steenhuisen, being the chief whip of the DA, should know better. If he behaves the way he's behaving,
There's a person on the floor. Take your seat.
No, she's ranting and raving. Cut her off.
Take your seat.
She's ranting and raving. What rule is she standing on? What rule? What rule is she standing on?
84, point of order.
No,
Rule number 84, point of order.
You cannot just rant and rave like you like. Huh? There's rules in this house that apply to you. You all have to apply by the rules.
Honourable members. Honourable members, take your seats.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, I was still on the platform.
Honourable members, can I request you that we proceed with this thing?
Okay.
Firstly, honourable members.
No, Honourable Deputy Speaker.
No.
Please, on a point of order, please.
Who's that?
On a point of order, please.
What's the point of order now, honourable member?
Honourable Deputy Speaker,
Finally.
Rule 85 on reflection on a member's dignity.
My dignity.
Should apply in this context.
My dignity.
Because Rule 85 does not allow members to reflect on a member's dignity. So I hereby rise on Rule 85.
Okay, take your seat, honourable member. Honourable members.
Honourable Deputy Speaker.
Deputy Speaker.
You want me to rule on this matter or not? You want me to rule on this matter or not?
I would like to take another point of order, if I may.
What? Yes. What's your point of
It's
order?
in terms of Rule 85.1. No member may impute improper motives to any other member or cast reflections upon a member's integrity or dignity. Two members now, including the Deputy Chief Whip of the majority party, who is the most dangerous person to democracy in this parliament, accused the Honourable Mayneer of running away from vetting. And you've allowed both those impunities of his dignity to take place unchallenged.
Honourable Steenhuisen, you are suggesting that I allowed them to proceed unchallenged. When you stopped me talking, isn't that ridiculous? That you stopped me from making a ruling? I just asked you here now that you are out of order, absolutely out of order. Honourable Mayneer, honourable members, honourable members, this matter requires considered ruling, and I'm going to do so. And I will deal with both instances of what happened here now, including those who just spoke without being given an opportunity to speak, who assumes that they have a special role to speak the way they like. And I do take exception, members, to deciding to throw stuff in my mouth, even as I want to make rulings, and you choose yourself to make your own rulings. I will work on this. Oh, Honourable Mayneer, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair.
Almost your caucus here, if I may say so, is disruptive. Proceed.
I would describe them, Deputy Speaker, as supportive.
Honourable member, your time is the clock malfunction there. Proceed, talk. We'll give you. Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I've said that member is a factory fault before, and I say it again, that member is a factory fault.
Deputy Speaker, point of order.
Yes, sir.
It is, I'm near the main door. Rule 85 does not allow casting aspersion on the dignity of another member. To say a member is a factory fault cannot be allowed for a moment to commence. The opposition know they will lose the debate now, they resort to degenerating it. We can't accept. He must withdraw, please. There's no factory fault here. They are honorable members. Honorable Mainir is also honorable for purposes of this House. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Mainir, why do you refer to a member as a factory fault? You're out of order.
I withdraw, Speaker. Deputy Speaker, as I was saying, whatever the case, in the end, it's the politics that is killing the economics in South Africa. We must give hope to the 9.6 million people who do not have jobs or who have given up looking for jobs in South Africa. However, to give hope to the 9.6 million people who do not have jobs or who have given up looking for jobs, we need a fundamental change in economic policy in South Africa. We need to implement a package of structural reforms designed to boost private sector investment and increase economic growth to an average of at least 3%. We need to introduce a package of cost-cutting measures aimed at reducing current spending, which is designed to stabilize national debt below 50% of GDP. We need to fight for the independence of the Reserve Bank rather than fight for the nationalization of the Reserve Bank. I hope you're listening, Ginger. We need to boost competition by privatizing or by part privatizing.
Yes, why are you rising, honourable member?
I rise on rule number 85. The honourable member in the podium is calling the minister, who is the member of this House, Ginger, shut up, Ginger.
Thank you, honourable member. Honourable Mania, have you referred to the minister in that way?
I did, because it's
Will you
factually
withdraw
true.
the remark, please?
Yes,
Thank you.
I withdraw. Thank you, Chairperson. I was saying we need to boost competition by privatizing or by part privatizing zombie state-owned enterprises, starting with South African Airways. And we need, most urgently of all, to scrap reckless economic policy proposals, including the formation of state banks, land expropriation without compensation, and the nationalization of the South African Reserve Bank in South Africa. That will give hope to the 9.6 million people who do not have jobs or have given up looking for jobs in South Africa. I thank you.
Thank you, honourable member. The next speaker is the Honourable Paulson.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. You two must learn to get along. You just got a few more months and then you're all going to sit on that side of the House. 2 days ago, Chairperson, it was announced that South Africa is officially in a recession. It has been a long time coming, and as the EFF, we are not surprised. The macroeconomic policies of both the ANC and the DA, which are informed by a neoliberal outlook and approach to the economy and government, is why we find ourselves in a recession. The ANC has allowed the economy to collapse at the hands of the private sector, which the DA very much supports, which relies on the exploitation of black labor, the extraction of our minerals, and corruption at the expense of our economy and our people. That is why, if you ask people, South Africans, they will tell you that this recession is nothing new. They live in a permanent recession, facing poverty, inequality, and unemployment every day of their lives. And any debate on the infrastructure development needed to fight poverty, inequality, unemployment, and underdevelopment must be seen within this context. What we need is a state-led, transformative developmental approach to infrastructure development. Yes. If we want to see any change in the living conditions of South Africans and the economy, Using the private sector for infrastructure development has proven to fail and leads to overspending, corruption, and exploitation, and the looting of state coffers. A state construction company needs to be established. This will eliminate the corruption that we see through the tender process, where bids are inflated and awarded illegally, while workers get paid peanuts and their bosses make huge profits from their labor. With a state construction company, it will cost less. The corruption linked to tenders will disappear. Workers will get paid proper salaries with benefits, and the services our people need will be delivered. If the ANC government took our advice, the deadline the Department of Basic Education set for itself by November 2016, there would be no school without water, electricity, proper sanitation would have been met. Instead, 2 years later, we still have schools with pit latrines, without water, without electricity. And the ANC still has the audacity to come here and talk about what must be done. If the government was serious about building infrastructure to fight poverty, inequality, unemployment, and underdevelopment, why have they not met the deadlines they set for themselves with the minimum norms and standards for school infrastructure? The government cannot even get the basics right, but in a changing world, what we consider to be infrastructure is also changing. In the world we live in, so much is done online, including economic activities. So the infrastructure of the internet also needs to be developed. Wi-Fi and data, in many ways, both fuel and the infrastructure of the fourth industrial revolution. But in this country, because of high data prices, it is inaccessible to many at the scale needed for productive economic activity. If we want to see our country participate in the fourth industrial revolution as inventors and producers, employers and employees, and not just consumers, data prices must fall, and a state with a clear vision is the only institution that can make this happen. As the EFF, we have always provided superior logic and clear proposal on what must be done to achieve our generational mission of economic freedom in our lifetime. And if the ANC had listened to us, we would not find ourselves where we are today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Ngwezi.
Honourable House Chairperson, South Africa has one of the most highest Gini coefficients in the world. Whilst we have addressed poverty in a small extent, inequality remains runaway train with the gap between the haves and the have-nots, increasing daily and exponentially. Poverty and inequality in South Africa, although rooted in the past exclusion, have in fact not been by any small measure properly addressed in the democratic South Africa. The creation of sustainable employment is a principal key to us in overcoming the legacy of exclusion. One of the pillars upon which this is forged, though, is through the establishment of a competitive infrastructure, as this will allow for existing South African businesses and new entrepreneurs to effectively compete both locally and abroad with the additional benefit of jobs creation. Jobs empower people, and better jobs benefit society as a whole. Yet the sad reality is that South African infrastructure is rapidly deteriorating, which not only places South African businesses at a distinct disadvantage in both domestic and global markets, but also reduces growth in the demand for labor. In respect of ICT infrastructure, why is South Africa still struggling to keep pace with the rest of the world? Our telecommunications and internet prices are so high that they are prohibitive to most South Africans. Why are we doing our citizens such a disservice by allowing such monopoly communication pricing? In the energy sector, we are failing. Medupi and Kusile are not only behind schedule, but are also ridiculous over budget. They are also coal-powered, and with a lifespan of 50 years, will contribute significantly to the country's carbon emissions, which we are trying to reduce. It is also a fact that Eskom now constitutes the largest contingent liability to government. If we turn to our transport infrastructure, We must concede that we are currently crippled by the high cost and inefficiencies at our seaports, which are the main entry ports for trade, by poor rail infrastructure and by high road freight cost. Such constraints only further to serve to reduce the competitiveness of South African business and raise the cost associated with the imports. Chairperson, if government is serious about reducing poverty and inequality in South Africa and about overcoming the legacy of exclusion and building a brighter future for all South Africans, then it must get work on building an integrated, comprehensive and globally competitive infrastructure. Secondly, House Chairperson, the state has almost 3,000 farms in this country. Turn these into viable agricultural production units. This will create jobs
Honourable
and
Member,
boost
your time
the
has
economic
expired.
development in our country. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I call the next speaker, I want to recognize in the gallery the learners and educator from the Bloemhof Girls High School in Stellenbosch. Welcome to Parliament. The next speaker is the Honourable Kubisa.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson, honorable members. This debate is very important. It is conducted at a critical time in our country when the economy has plummeted into recession. The debate sponsored by Honorable Holomisa provides another opportunity for us to come with ways and means to try and generate ideas that may lead to a broader debate of economic growth. Poverty, inequality, and unemployment and underdevelopment have grown exponentially recently. Unemployment in our country is alarmingly too high. Underdevelopment continues to soar. The gap between the rich and the poor continues to widen. The rich become richer and the poor becomes poorer. A study entitled Overcoming Poverty and Inequality in South Africa, an assessment of drivers, constraints, and opportunities prepared jointly by the National Planning Commission Secretariat, State South Africa, and the World Bank, found that poverty and unemployment remained very high in South Africa. Unemployment reached 25.1% of the workforce in 2015 and was 27.7% in the third quarter of 2017. And between 2014 and 2015 and 2016-2017 financial years, 6.2% of the gross domestic product was spent on infrastructure. And according to the political scientist J.P. Landman, this was slightly down compared to 6.7% of the GDP share on infrastructure between 2009, 2010, 2013, 2014 financial year. What does this mean? This country must continue to invest in building and upgrading its roads, bridges, pipes, dams, houses, schools, clinics, railway lines, and ports. This country must service its power stations, and there should be no rollover, and invest in solar, gas, biofuels, and other forms of alternative energy, and ensure that South Africans, especially the poor young people and women who find themselves on the sidelines as victims of poverty, unemployment, benefit from the creation of jobs which accrue from the rolling of infrastructure. We need to upgrade our metro rail so that it is user-friendly and safer. Our game reserves and parks must meet the international standards to attract tourists. Technology and innovation is the way to go. Honorable House Chair, according to the Nedbank Chief Economist David Dakes, the government must work closely with the private sector and draw from the private sector's experience to invest in the infrastructure by removing as many impediments to private sector investment as possible, such as fixing the electricity crisis and labor laws, working with the private sector and drawing from the international best practice and working closely with the rest of African regions. There is no doubt that our country can gain from investment in infrastructure. There is need to properly demarcate our strategic zones and improve on public transport, freight, and logistics. This country needs to correctly deal with the electricity challenges, capacitate our municipalities so that they work with ESCOM accordingly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honourable Okota.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Fellow members of the House, I would like to suggest that it's very important that we conduct our discussions such that members of the public who are visiting may understand something and take away something after listening to us. But the way we shout across to each other is not helpful. Let No, let me say a few things. I'm not going to say very many things. Before we deal with the idea of building infrastructure, we must ask ourselves, why is it that we inherited significant amounts of infrastructure? No country in the continent of Africa has got more infrastructure than this country. What is happening at the present time is that infrastructure we inherited is falling apart everywhere. The tarred roads, just, sometimes to respect and keep quiet.
Order, honorable members.
Let me make my point.
Order.
That infrastructure is falling apart, the tarred roads, the Vaal River is full of sewage. All of those things are happening because we are not training young people to become people that can, first of all, sustain what we have. And then secondly, to go and build and expand that infrastructure. Go to any township, go to any town. The tarred roads that happen to have been there are gone. You go to the towns, the town Vereeniging is finished. There's nothing left because we are not training South Africans to build infrastructure. You're talking all kinds. If speaking English was building infrastructure, we would be number one. But we're speaking lots of English words, not doing anything in practice. I must be brutally frank, because this is only where I can advance our nation. Let's go and educate and train our young men and women, black and white, of all. Let's train civil engineers who can maintain sewerage, who can build roads, who can service traffic lights. The reason every one of the towns, the economy is shrinking, the traffic lights are dead and accidents are happening because we didn't train the youth.
Honorable Lakota. No, you still have time left.
He's running away. He must come back.
No. Why are you rising, honorable member?
She doesn't want to hear the truth.
Why are you rising?
I'm rising because I've had my hand up for a long time.
Yes, I've recognized you now, honorable member.
But the member is walking away already.
I called him back. You can ask, why did you rise?
I rose because I wanted to ask the honorable member, you'd better just shut up.
Honorable member. Honorable member.
I'm wanting to ask the honorable member. Yes.
Why are you rising?
I'm rising because I'd like to ask the honorable member a question.
Honorable Lakota, are you prepared to take a question?
Well, she can't ask me a question before she listens to what I'm saying.
No, Honorable Lakota,
you didn't hear what I said. But you want to ask me a question.
Are you prepared to
take a question? You must listen to what I'm saying and then ask me a question.
Honorable
Lakota. Now I say again, let's go and educate the youth of our country, train them in agriculture, in maintenance of infrastructure, civil engineers,
Honorable
all
Lakota,
of that, and then you can talk about building infrastructure.
Honorable Lakota, your time is now expired. You won't build it by just having people you push in there. Thank you. Thank you.
He's running away from the question. That's why he should have stood there to take the
honorable
question.
Member, it's clear the honorable member didn't want to take a question from you.
If he didn't want to take the question, he should have said so.
Honorable member, will you take your seat now, honorable member? You haven't been recognized. You can't just take the mic and address the House if you are not recognized. No, honorable member, please read the rules. The next speaker is Honorable Meshu.
Thank you, Chairperson. The ACDP would like to extend their sincere condolences to the families who lost their loved ones while fighting a fire in a provincial government building yesterday in Johannesburg. The Gauteng Premier and his government knew that the building was unsafe and that it had only a 21% level of compliance. Yet they expected and allowed staff to continue using it. Had they taken corrective action when they became aware that the building did not comply with safety standards, then this strategy would not have happened. In a G20 Global Infrastructure Hub report, it was revealed last year that South Africa needs to invest 6 trillion rand by 2014 in just on water and electricity sectors to plug its infrastructure investment gap and address economic and population growth between now and 2040. The National Development Plan, which led to the promulgation of the Infrastructure Development Act, setting the framework for the PIC, implies that for the first time since 1994, South Africa has established a clear policy basis from which infrastructure development can be undertaken. Government allocation of 1.5 trillion rands to infrastructure projects over the next 5 years is a critical step in clearing the backlog and underspending on critical infrastructure projects that South Africa urgently requires. Economist L.C. Snyman told consulting engineers in Johannesburg in March that this year is going to be extremely difficult for our infrastructure sector owing to the 12% decrease in infrastructure spending. The cut will affect the local municipalities and provincial governments directly, with Snyman noting that when one has financial pressure, capital investment is the first thing to be cut. Much of the downturn has to do with international markets and the economic situation that the country is in. It also has to do with political issues and confidence, which has led to a major financial constraint in the industry. The public sector infrastructure program encompasses energy, transport, and logistics infrastructure, housing subsidy initiatives, health education facilities, as well as the investment in water and sanitation infrastructure. And without support from the private sector, that won't happen. She continued to say 6 trillion rands target, according to economist David Riot, is a wake-up call to government to accelerate its efforts to woo the private sector so that it feels safe and secure to invest. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is Honourable Chaisa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. All roads, electricity, housing, sanitations, rail lines and airlines, all this now should be tackled at the same time so as to bring about this comprehensive infrastructure. The intergovernmental relations and interdepartmental now should be the idea to bring or to achieve this goal. The old infrastructure should be a thing of the past so that now we get down into the bottom of the whole issue. So what we experienced yesterday, what happened, that incident of chopping yesterday should not have happened. The challenges of poverty, unemployment, inequality, and underdevelopment often lead to crime, loose morals, and decline in the growth of economy. We need to come together with an integrated and comprehensive strategy as suggested by General Holomisa, so that now we put this country in a very good manner. We need to have good roads, railways, human settlement, and all this now should lead and bring about the growth of our economy. For the farmers now to have good roads, then these roads would help them to take the approaches to markets if roads are good. Then installation of pipes would help the farmers to irrigate their land. The good living standards now people would enjoy. People need electricity and for both farming and living. Many people perhaps in this construction will be employed. Then poverty will be done away with, because poverty does not assist the ordinary people in the land. If all this now can be spread to people staying away from the town, that is in rural areas, it means those people having received these services can regard themselves as also equals, it means then that inequality would have been done away with. Those people now that need proper services should be cared by the government. Tar roads should be repaired, and if this can just be done almost at the same time by all the departments that are relevant, then this can just help us a lot, so that now we contribute to this, or to the growth of the economy of our country. So we agree now with the strategy that UTM comes up with, that we should bring about this integrated and comprehensive strategy for the purpose of good infrastructure in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Steenhuisen.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. We've heard a lot about physical infrastructure today, but I think we often lose sight of the fact that there's equally important infrastructure in our land, and that is a democratic infrastructure that's designed to entrench our democracy, ensure accountability and good governance, and precisely so to fight poverty, inequality, and unemployment, as well as underdevelopment. And I agree with the Deputy Minister that one of the biggest enemies towards this democratic infrastructure in South Africa and the fight against inequality, unemployment, and poverty is corruption and theft from the public purse that robs our ability to implement this infrastructure. And none of this has been outlined in this particular motion. And this is why we've taken such a strong line against the scourge of state capture. It's why we're insisting that the ANC as a political organization appear before the Zondo Commission to account for their role in visiting state capture on South Africa. Because it's very easy in hindsight to blame Mr. Zuma, as Mr. Enoch Gondwana did this morning. But Mr. Zuma was created, he was enabled, he was supported, he was protected and defended in this very house by none other organization than the people who sit to right to me in the ANC, and they must account. But, House Chair, the 27th of August is a day that will live in infamy, a day of betrayal of the people of Nelson Mandela Bay. It was the day that the coalition of corruption was visited as a plague on the people of Nelson Mandela Bay. It will be remembered as the day that the UDM and their fellow travelers handed back the city of Nelson Mandela Bay to the very people who brought it to the brink of collapse. And the leader of the UDM cannot say he didn't know. The leader of the UDM cannot say that he's not aware of what this party on the right is capable of doing. Because he said, and I quote in February of 2017, it's not in the ANC's interests to have this coalition government succeed. We are aware of their desperate attempts to recapture control of the municipality through devious and dirty means. The UDM shall never capitulate and cooperate with them, unquote. Well, we know how that has ended up, don't we? Because what has been visited on them under the ultimate rent seeker in South African politics in the guise of Mr. Mongameli Bobane, who has been created, protected, enabled, and defended by none other than the UDM leader himself. And who is in this coalition of corruption? Not on their own. They've joined with the biggest rent seekers from this side, Mr. Andile Lungisa, a convicted criminal.
Point of order.
And these... Honourable Steenhuisen, will you just take your seat, please? Why are you rising, Honourable Member?
Point of order, Rule 92, but with reference to Rule 85 being violated by the Honourable Member, House Chair. In that, in referring to the leader, the Honourable Leader of the UDM, the Leader of Opposition actually casts aspersions on the integrity and dignity of the Leader of Opposition. It cannot be acceptable in terms of Rule 85. We propose that he must withdraw immediately, House Chair. Thank you.
Honourable Member, I'm following the debate very closely. I will look specifically into what you're referring to, although I didn't pick it up that way. It is a political debate that we're engaging in. And there is a speaker from the UDM who will have the right to reply at the end, and we will allow that speaker to do so. Please continue, Honourable Member.
And what has this corrupt coalition done? How have they covered themselves in glory in the first 10 days of their office? What is the first act? Mr. Babani, show me the tenders. Because you see, it's got nothing to do about the people. It's got nothing to do about good governance. It's getting your hands on the spoils again, as was outlined by Crispian Olver in his book, How to Steal a City. Because for Mr. Mongameli Babani, the people don't matter. How he lines his pockets that matter. And those collaborators that have helped him must be held accountable. Because you can't say you're against state capture and be for city capture. You cannot say you're against corruption but protect UDM corruption. You cannot say you're against corrupt leaders but back up dishonest UDM leaders. You cannot say you're against rigged party conferences if you rig political conferences in your own regions and branches yourself. You cannot say that you're against third terms for presidents when you serve for 21 years.
The next speaker is the Honourable Nguni. Continue.
Thank you very much,
Order, Honourable Members.
Thank you, House Chair. Honourable members of the executive in our midst, honourable members of the August House, thank you to the UDM for bringing forward such an important discussion about infrastructure as a plan and a mechanism to ensure that we deal with poverty, with inequality, and underdevelopment, as you so couched it. It is a proper motion upon a called upon time. It is very, very interesting. Pete is still Honourable House Chair. I tried to listen. I could take 2 minutes of my time and ask the leader of opposition, the chief whip of opposition, what aspects of infrastructure rollout, infrastructure strategy did you discuss? And respectfully so, you know, Honourable Member, you discussed none. You went all over the show, and there would be...
Honourable Nguni, will you just take your seat, please? Why are you rising, Honourable Member?
The member asked me a question. I'm happy to respond.
No. You can discuss it in the corridors outside later, Honourable Steenhuisen.
I think we're on the same flight tomorrow. We'll have to sit
yes,
together.
or over a beverage outside, not now. Continue, Honourable Nguni.
Thank you very much, Honourable House Chair. I would like to start by acknowledging profusely the points made by Honourable Madala Masuku, who mapped a clear context of infrastructure development, as well as the case that he so compellingly stated that included the infrastructure rollout plan and also highlighting infrastructure as part and parcel of the function of the economic system or the economic framework, which he visited in great detail. He did outline policy approaches and structures for infrastructure development or delivery, inclusive of, if I may summarize from his presentation here, 860 billion over the last 3 years or since 2014, dedicated to infrastructure development, 784,000 jobs that have been created, or to put it differently, 1 billion rands a day that had been spent. He did allude to the 2012 National Infrastructure Plan, which consolidated 150 various individual or scattered projects in 9 provinces, brought together under 18 strategic infrastructure projects, SIPs. And then he referred to various bulk infrastructure grants. I had thought that, Honourable House Chair, there was going to be a discussion whether that is fallacy. It doesn't exist. It remains facts and it cannot be proven otherwise. The spatial manifestation and undoing of the apartheid legacy via these various tools that were alluded to. Well, Honourable House Chair, the Honourable Mainer stood here. It is very sad for some of us who, as teenagers, faced the might of racial supremacy,
the harassment as youth. We never had youth, some of us. We were on the run through and through. We had to fight up until we brought apartheid to its knees. When 24 years into democracy, you get signs of bullying and you get signs of insults. I will quote it, we can go to Hansard. I really listened very carefully while Honorable Mainir was on the floor. Some of the statements were, the Honorable President of the country, in fact, there is no alternative to that president in this country. You rather rest assured, have peace with yourself, have peace with your family and children, and know that you're not gonna usher in anything better than the South Africans have actually mandated President Cyril Ramaphosa. In actual fact, you say he's a man without a plan, in a toxic mix, who has got much spoken and legal stimulus. These are the words thrown at us. It really reminds me of the apartheid era. This is what we were told day in and day out by the apartheid supremacists. We were nothing. All our leaders were nothing. Nelson Mandela was nothing. Oliver Tambo was nothing. Yet again, President Cyril Ramaphosa is nothing but a man with much spoken and legal stimulus. You have not followed, you have closed your ears. In actual fact, President Ramaphosa has done everything of the best in turning the country around. He should be congratulated. He should be congratulated. He saved South Africa. And I'm just short of being as religious as some of you can profess to say he is actually God sent, Honorable Mainir, you know, to help us, to help our country. As we speak, Honorable Masuku highlighted the targets of investments as a sign, as a mechanism to turn around, to ensure the employment of these 9.8 million people who are unemployed. President Ramaphosa is doing nothing less, is spending sleepless nights in making sure. Then there was a bunch of other issues that Honorable Mainir referred to, including land expropriation without compensation, the state banks, and nationalization. Let me pull those under one basket and say, on land expropriation, don't you think if you read the rules carefully, that you will then be guilty of anticipation? You know there's a rule in the rules that's called the rule of anticipation. Already as we sit, and this morning and yesterday and throughout the week and throughout the weeks, there has been an engagement on the discussion of land expropriation without compensation. Now, to come here and want to make contributions on an issue is being guilty, falling foul of violating anticipation rule. Yes, it is. Go for it, whichever.
Nguni, will you just take your seat, please? Yes, Honourable Member.
House Chairperson, the Honourable Mainir would not be guilty of that because the programming committee would have had to have programmed the matter for it to be in violation of the rule of anticipation.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
It's not a violation.
Thank you. Take your seat, please. Continue, Honourable Nguni.
Thank you so much, Honourable House Chair. Honourable Stenes, let us respond to this. One very patriotic South African says in 1990, and I'll tell you the venue was Lentegeur, right? He says, when there was a poor white problem in the 40s, that is in the 1940s, what did the Afrikaner or the nationalist government do? They called for the nationalization of the banks, the nationalization of everything. They called for cooperatives and all. Now, when we in the ANC in the present day, that was what the white government did. That is why, in demographic terms, if you count now, the percentage of black people who are toiling, unemployed, is far higher. Is because of the architecture in the 40s, in what Joe Slovo, because I know you will not know who said this, in Lentegeur in 1990, after the negotiations, the talks about talks. He says that when there was a poor white problem, then they called for nationalization of the mines, the nationalization, and they called for the formation of cooperatives. This is how you still have some establishments to this day, like the Foxcars and many other institutions. If you want me to list them, I will list them happily for you because you don't listen to some others, right? Now, When there was a poor white problem, you know there was a poor white problem in this country? Yes. Then you understood then and you benefited from the nationalization, from the cooperatives and everything. Now, as a consequence, there's a poor black problem. Now, to the poor black problem, you don't want us to prescribe solutions. All the solutions we prescribe, you seek to condemn them. You think there must be no state bank? Go to all the countries. All of us, we are fairly traveled. Find if there are no state banks. There are. There are state banks throughout even the first world, the second world. So what's your problem with those resolutions of the governing party, right? Now, we got insults. Honorable Deputy President is not in the house. He is said to be the most dangerous this and that. I repeat, you think we don't know English? You taught us. Yes, it's your language, language of your own grandfathers, but we can talk to you, we can meet you at your own level in that own language, because language is neutral anyway. Right. Now, you tell us, how dare on a debate on infrastructure, you castigate the integrities of the honorable members of this house. I dare repeat, Honorable House Chair, Honorable Mainir, for purposes of this house, is honorable, and I repeat, Honorable Mainir. But you know very well it's only for purposes of this house and nothing else, right? Now, the last speaker, Honorable House Chair, before me is the Honorable Chief Whip of the Opposition. And then he pretends like he's gonna talk about infrastructure. And then there he goes and camps in some unfortunate terrain he has lost, Nelson Mandela Bay. Few notes, if we read elections from the same notebook, Honorable Stieneis, through you, Honorable House Chair. You never had an outright victory in Nelson Mandela Bay. No. In the wards in Nelson Mandela Bay, you lost to the ANC. Go Google statistics here and now and raise your hand and correct me. In Nelson Mandela Bay, you lost in the wards to the ANC. Overall, the municipality, in electoral terms, we are in a democracy now, 24 years. Yes, you know the other, but we're talking about this people's democracy. In a democracy, that municipality is called Hung, H-U-N-G. Now, Nelson Mandela Metropolitan Municipality is and was a Hung municipality. So the date of the 27th of the 8th that you refer to is the date that was bound to happen because Nelson Mandela was hung during the 2016 elections, and the poor, in a configurative sense, parties there, minority parties, could no longer hold the yoke of bullyism by the DA whenever it goes. In the Western Cape, Ma'am Honorable Patricia Dilil must run for her life. Everywhere else, people, and you talk about all the things you talk about. There was Honorable Khreiling here. He used to sit somewhere then. Where did you take him? You deployed him to the Cape Town City Metro. But you dare stand here and talk about the metros and everything else. And look yourself in the script. What kind of party are you? What kind of hypocrisy? The party DA is actually, if it is able to withdraw Honorable Khreiling from the floor and take him to the Cape Town City Metro and think that all other parties in all other metros cannot do anything. In fact, we await an obvious day, and the obvious day is Maibuye is city of Johannesburg. The obvious day is Maibuye is city of Tshwane. You do know that it's just a matter of time. All you can do now is stand in this national platform and lament and lament. The fact is our brothers and sisters, the black parties in the opposition, have really discovered who you are in reality, and they are clear that they would rather sort out differences with the majority party, the ANC, than work with you. So the metros will come before the next local government elections. Don't be surprised. I can't even say surprise, because those metros of Johannesburg, you must just prepare benches and take some dead wood out and to refill to Mayor Msimang and Mayor whoever of back here or face whatever else you will face. The sad news that you know very well, you have been seeing statistics, is that going to the next elections, in fact, the ruling party, the ANC, will not go weaker. If anything, it is going stronger. We cannot wait for 2019. We cannot wait for 2019. The ANC is ready for you. Your benches are gonna shrink. Some of you must find their way or alternative things to do. The ANC is here to govern yet another term. Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Kwankwa.
Well, thank you very much to all the speakers who contributed in this debate. I think...
Order, Honorable Members.
Well, this one question, and I want to put it in Xhosa. And say, uba thina si decide ukuba sizawuformisha urhulumente nabana ingxaki abanileyo. Bangena phi? Ningena phi Democratic Alliance? The bottom line is, I just want to start with this issue of land expropriation without compensation, Honorable Menir. I don't think the boogeyman approach can ever work. There's never the correct time to redistribute land using land expropriation without compensation because the markets and those who have money will sabotage you anyway. All that we need to do is to make sure that we do it in the right way and in the most responsible manner that is not going to sabotage the South African economy. I want to come to you, Honorable Steenhuisen. You made a number of allegations against the UDM, including my leader. And I think one of the things that we need to put it on record and say that one of the things that we've been consistently doing as the UDM, we've been asking you a specific question saying, if you have evidence of corruption against Mongameli Bobani, bring it forward. Why, I read the PricewaterhouseCoopers report, but we're never given the supporting evidence. I don't need a book because the book doesn't give me evidence. It doesn't, it's at times, some of these books are actually not different from the newspapers. They come up with all sorts of allegations and they are captured by certain people. The other issue here is that the problem with the Democratic Alliance in particular, it's an issue that we highlighted even during the mediation efforts between Trolip and Bobani, was that you need to learn to be able to lead in a collective. It's a matter of collective leadership that has caused the complete collapse of the coalition government. And the other issue is, no one can tell us who we're going to form a coalition government with. We remain an independent political party and no one can try to intimidate us. That will never work. Show me tenders. I've been told that exactly what Bobani is doing at the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro without leadership there is what the Democratic Alliance did when we're still part of the coalition. The DA, maybe the National Treasury is also captured, who knows? Apparently at the time what happened is that the DA requested a briefing as head of the government. They requested a briefing to say, what tenders do we have? What are the vacancies in the municipalities? Because they wanted to be able to map the way forward. And when the UDM does it, it's a problem.
Honorable Kwankwa, your time is now expired. Thank you. Honorable members, that concludes the debate on this subject. And we now come to motions without notice. Does any member of the ANC wish to give a motion without notice?
Yes.
The ANC?
The African National Congress moves without notice that the House knows that on the 23rd August 2018, Heritage Ways announced that one of the South Africans' foremost music luminaries, Letambuli's home in Orlando East, Soweto, will be turned into heritage site. Further notes that this house where Letambuli was born will be honored in September 24th with the Johannesburg Heritage Site Blue Plaque from Heritage Ways in partnership with the City of Johannesburg Immovable Heritage Department and the Johannesburg Heritage Foundation for being the cradle that reared a national treasure. Acknowledges that various artists, including Letambuli, played a significant role in the struggle for South African liberation through their art and music, and some of them went to foreign lands to spread the message about our condition. Believes that this initiative should be a continuous process of uncovering the unsung heroes who are mostly recognized outside the borders of our country than being recognized and honored in the country of birth, and calls for more recognition of South African artists, for their contribution in developing art and putting South African art in the world stage.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The DA?
Thank you, Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes that despite only having 650 permanent staff members, the East Rand Water Authority, ERWAT, spent in a 3-month period 84,000 Rand on twin-ply toilet paper, which means that each employee on average visited the toilet for a minimum of 5 times per day. Further notes that ERWAT paid 1,040 Rand per ream of A4 blue printing paper, which retails at 140 Rand per ream. This is 740% above the retail price. And they spent 165,000 Rand on tea and coffee, equating to approximately 600,000 cups of coffee, or 12 cups per employee per day. They also spent 165,000 Rand on biscuits during this period. Calls upon the management of ERWAT to tighten their belts and lead by example, given the financial state that Ekurhuleni Metro is under, instead of spending an incredible 2,000 Rand per person for boardroom lunches, and recognizes that the ANC-run Metro is wasting money on luxuries while basic services are not being delivered to the residents of Ekurhuleni. Applauds the DA-run Metros across the country for priding themselves on extracting value for money meant for real change through service delivery. I so move. Thank you, Chairman.
If there are no objections, I put the motion.
The ANC objects.
There's an objection. The EFF?
I hereby rise on behalf of the economic freedom fighters that the House note the collision of 2 metro rail trains on Tuesday.
Order, honourable
in
members.
Johannesburg. Further note that the collision left 112 commuters seriously injured. Recognize that because of the legacy of apartheid spatial planning, it was mainly black people who were injured in that collision. Further recognize the need for the reimagining of our cities and how they are planned. Acknowledge the need for an investigation into what went wrong and caused the crash. Further acknowledge that PRASA is responsible for those that use its services and is liable for the medical care of all who were injured. We wish those who were injured a strong and speedy recovery. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The ANC?
Thank you, Chairperson. Okay. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House knows the sadness the death of 6 school learners who were killed in an accident after the minibus they were traveling in collided head-on with a bus at Komazi, Mpumalanga on Friday, 31st August. Further notes that 4 of the 6 learners died at the scene, while the other 2 died in hospital. Also notes that 25 people who were critically injured during the accident were rushed to the nearest hospital. Understands that the case of culpable homicide was registered with the police. Acknowledges the presence of the safety engineering team from the Department of Community Safety and Security Liaison that was dispatched to investigate the crash. ANC pleads with the drivers who are ferrying commuters to always adhere to the road safety. I thank you.
Honourable members, I now put the motion. Are there any objections? No objections, agreed to. You are reminded, honourable members, that notices of motions without notice should not exceed 1.5 minutes. The IFP.
Thank you, Chair. I move without notice on behalf of the Nkatha Freedom Party that this House, 1, notes that the Southern African Wildlife College staff members Bruce McDonald and Marianne de Kock were recognized at the 2018 Rhino Conservation Awards on Friday, 24th August 2018. Further notes that they were placed second and third respectively in the category Rhino Conservation Supporter for their exceptional contribution to the cause. Acknowledges that the Rhino Conservation Awards were founded in 2011 to recognize significant role players in rhino conservation. The gala event to announce the winners was hosted by the Game Rangers Association of South Africa, the Department of Environmental Affairs, Carl Zeiss AG, and China New Enterprise Incorporated, under the patronage of His Serene Highness Prince Albert II of Monaco, who delivered a video message commending all of the nominees for their contribution to the struggle. Recognizes that McDonald is the college's aerial wing pilot and Marianne de Kock is Programs Manager for Protected Area Integrity, African Field Ranger Training Services Division. Finally, urges all South Africans to be mindful of conservation and note that success will only be achieved if we tackle our challenges together, whether it is in running a center of specialization in rhino conservation education, training and skills development, or tackling the most pressing of conservation issues out in the field. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The NFP.
House Chairperson, I move on behalf of the National Freedom Party that this House notes with shock and disgust the continuous scourge of child kidnapping, child trafficking, child murders and rapes that happen when children walk to and from school in most parts of the country. Further note that in most instances, children are kidnapped for days or months and then killed, left in the bushes to die and decompose. Hereby calls upon the law enforcement agencies to arrest the perpetrators and that justice must be served so that they get harsh sentences. I so move. Thank you.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The ANC.
The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes with pride the story of Mbalenhle Sipengane, who became a successful farmer at the age of 24. Further notes that she runs Monzai X, a poultry farm on a plot outside Vanderbay Park. Understand that since taking over the running of her family's poultry farm 2 years ago, the 24-year-old Mbalenhle Sipengane has more than doubled the farm's turnover. Further understand that the farm produces more than 31,857 trays of eggs a year, allowing Sipengane to generate an annual turnover of more than 1.4 million rands. Remembers that the farm belongs to the Land Reform Department and has been leased to her parents' company, Monzai X Poultry Farm, since 2004. Further remembers that her unexpected passion for farming was instilled in her by her parents, who struggled to keep Monzai X Poultry Farm going over the years. Believes that her success will encourage youth to be involved in farming and congratulates Mbalenhle Sipengane on her successful venture. Thank you.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The UDM.
Thank you, House Chair. I move without notice on behalf of the United Democratic Movement that the House notes that Zolani Tete received a car from Mercedes-Benz in recognition of his achievements in the sport of boxing. Further notes that he was made an ambassador of the motor vehicle company a month ahead of his World Boxing Super Series bantamweight clash against Russian Michael Ayolan in Russia. Believing that these acts by manufacturers show their genuine intention to develop and invest in the social fabric of the most destitute parts of the country, encourages government to attract more companies like Mercedes-Benz in South Africa that add value to the country over and above job creation, recognizes the importance that sport plays in building a society, and sends its well wishes to Zolani Tete in his match against Russian Michaelan Olan, I can't pronounce his surname, on the 13th of October this year. Thank you.
It's a very interesting surname, that. If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. Freedom Front Plus, the DA.
I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House note in a groundbreaking and historical move, the laws of cricket have been published in isiXhosa. Further notes that it is the first time ever that the laws of the game have been published in an African language. Also notes that the Department of Cultural Affairs and Sport in the Western Cape, linguistic and isiXhosa language specialist Olisa Chongolo and cricket historian Andre Odendaal were among those who worked with Cricket South Africa and Melbourne Cricket Club for the translation, and applauds this as it will go a long way in creating opportunities for kids playing cricket and in building one South Africa for all. I so move.
Honourable members, if there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. It would have been so interesting if you would have read it in Xhosa. The EFF.
I move without notice on behalf of the economic freedom fighters that the House notes that on Sunday, 9 September, it will be 145 years since the death of Inkosi Maqoma Kanxeka Karharabe Kaphalo, who was murdered in Robben Island by the British colonial regime in 1873. Further notes that Inkosi Maqoma, affectionately known as Jongu Msobomvu, was, according to his biographer Timothy Stapleton, perhaps the greatest guerrilla fighter ever produced in the sub-Saharan Africa, and led 3 of the 9 wars of resistance fought by African people in the Eastern Cape against British colonialism and land dispossession. Acknowledges that Maqoma was hated by the British colonial regime for his resolute fight against the repercussions annexation of land from African people, and for his bravery in the wars that he led against them. Further acknowledges that the British could only defeat him by adopting scorched earth tactics, by burning crops and capturing women and children. Despite all this, South African today recognizes Maqoma tormentors such as Harry Smith and other colonial leaders, but there is nothing done in memory of this great fighter for reclamation of African land. Today, 145 years later, the dream of reclamation of African land that Maqoma died for is close to be realized. Ask the House to send its token of appreciation for the role Maqoma played to the Nqeshe royal family, the House of Sandile, and the rest of African people for whom Maqoma died fighting, and ensure them that Maqoma's death was not in vain. Join us when we proclaim, Jongu Mfosobomvu.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. Yes.
No,
are you
no,
objecting?
No, I'm supporting. That's my forefather. I support that emphatically. That's history.
The ANC.
The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes that a new documentary, District 6 Rising from the Dust, has bagged an award of excellence from the Scandinavian Film Festival, where it will be making its world premiere at the festival in Helsinki, Finland, in October 2018. Acknowledges that this new documentary has given a voice to the dispossessed community of District 6 in Cape Town. Further acknowledges that the film will also be making its international premiere at the Cape Town International Film Market and Festival next year. Understands that the documentary, the filmmaker Viam Williams and Nafia Cox talks about personal accounts of how in 1966, the homes and land of those of their grandparents were declared an all-white area under the Oppressive Group Areas Act. Recalls that Williams and her family moved back into District 6 in 2013 when a house was restituted to her family, and they have worked on this project for 5 years. Congratulate the producers of the film, Williams and Cox, on receiving the award. We so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. Cope. ACDP. The ANC.
The ANC would like to congratulate the 2 departments, in particular the Department of Water and Sanitation with partnership in terms of with the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research to enhance the service delivery to those who lack access to water. The Department of Water and Sanitation and the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research have partnered to complete a project on the validation and verification of water users. While the initial primary purpose of this work was to determine existing lawful use of national water resources, this project also form critical basis for other aspects of water management, such as micro and micro water resources planning, water allocation reforms, water use compliances, monitoring and enforcement. The ANC so moved.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The AIC.
Thank you, House Chair. I hereby move without notice on behalf of African Independent Congress that the House notes that the Department of Basic Education is paying 1,316 rand per child in each school and every school, and each year 50% of the amount paid per child must be used for minor repairs. It is therefore surprising that the learners will be taught in classrooms without window panes and broken doors. It is also amazing that the school cannot even erect one toilet in the meantime while they are waiting for the financial allocation from the department. That there would be even not a lock for the principal's office and staff room. Where is the money? The SGB should also be part of the school so as to see how these monies are spent. I therefore call upon the Department of Basic Education to address these issues. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. Agang. The ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson. The African National Congress moved without a notice that the House notes the sadness, the death of a person and injury of 3 others in a fire at the clay oven informal settlement in 4 ways. Johannesburg on Saturday, 1st September 2018. Further notes that around 80 homes were gutted and about 200 people have been displaced due to the blaze. Believe that the fire started during a domestic dispute. Calls upon residents to be vigilant when heating devices are activated at homes and convey its condolences to the family and colleagues of the deceased. I so moved.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The APC, the PAC, the DA.
Honorable Chairperson, I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes that the DA won the Nala Ward by-election yesterday in the Free State, taking it from the ANC. Further notes that the DA grew from receiving 28.35% of the vote to 48.82% of the vote. Recognizes that the people of Nala have had enough of poor service delivery, and 4, acknowledges that the community realizes that the DA is the only party that can bring total positive change to South Africa. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion.
The ANC objects.
There's an objection, it's not agreed to. The ANC. Order, honorable members. The ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson. The African National Congress moved without notice that the House note with great sadness the death of the 3 firefighters who were trying to put off the blaze in the Benning Gauteng Provincial Department of Health and Human Settlement offices on 37 Albertina Sisulu Road. Wednesday, the 5th of September 2018. Further note that one of the firefighters was responding to the blaze at the building when he fell on to his death. The other two firefighters died while trying to extinguish the deadly fire. Also note that 13 health workers, 8 other firefighters have been admitted to hospital. Understand the building was not compliant in terms of health and safety regulation and is only 21% compliant, while ideally it is supposed to be 85% compliance or higher. We realize that the cause of the fire is not yet ascertained. We welcome the planned investigation care at ascertaining the cause of the fire. We also commend the firefighters, police, paramedics for the quick response. We further recommend the firefighters for the supreme sacrifice for risking their life in order to save the life of others, as well as the property. We also convey his condolences to the family of the deceased and wish those injured a speedy recovery. So we move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. Order, honourable members. That concludes motions without notice. The next item on the order paper is member statements. Does any member of the ANC wish to make a statement? Honourable member at the back.
Thank you. The ANC congratulates the Department of Basic Education on the strides being made to eradicate unsafe and inappropriate infrastructure through the ASIDI program. On Tuesday, the 4th September, the Minister of Education, Mrs. Angie Motshekga, handed over the impressive new state-of-the-art school to Delft South Primary School here in Western Cape. This will serve this community, giving renewed hope and restoring dignity to the education for this community. We are hopeful that this new infrastructure will be a safe haven for the young learners who have to navigate through drug-infested streets and gangsterism in their community. This marks 205 the number of ASIDI schools that have been completed and handed over to the communities across the country. More than the story of bricks and mortar, ASIDI schools are helping to restore the dignity and pride of people who had gone too long deprived of facilities that were taken from them.
Siyabonga lungehloniphekile.
Siyabonga.
Nyalo ngitawucela iDA.
Thank you, Chairperson. It hasn't taken the Coalition for Corruption long to get their sticky fingers back into the till in Nelson Mandela Bay. Last week, the MEC for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs in the Eastern Cape, Fikile Kasa, facilitated an illegal regime change in the city. And as I said at the time, it was little more than a coup d'etat. On Friday, the Minister for COGTA sent a team to Nelson Mandela Bay to determine the facts surrounding the matter. They were shown the door by the UDM's pretender to the mayoral post, Mongameli Bobani, and his cronies, and accused of being spies. Now it is reported in the media that so-called Mayor Bobani issued illegal instructions to heads of departments through his ANC sidekicks to interfere with tender processes and the appointment of municipal personnel. This is in clear violation of the Municipal Systems Act and the Code of Conduct for Councillors, but that's never stopped Bobani and his gang before. The question we need to ask ourselves is whether this is still a country where the rule of law reigns supreme. And if it does, what is the Minister of Cooperative Governance doing to sort out the mess created by his colleagues in Nelson Mandela Bay and to restore it to its lawfully elected government, namely the Democratic Alliance and its coalition partners?
Ngiyacela iEFF.
Enkosi Chair, the 28th of September is International Safe Abortion Day, And like many countries in the world, too many South African women put their lives at risk because they do not have access to safe abortions. If government is committed to the rights and protection of women, and as they claimed for the whole of August, the Department of Health must ensure that the reproductive rights of women, like access to safe abortion, is protected. We call on the Department of Health to use International Safe Abortion Day as an opportunity to raise awareness about safe abortions, and that the Department of Health must dedicate this day to a national program with events in each and every province, with a build-up of awareness campaign and communication messages to ensure maximum participation, to educate women, healthcare providers, and society at large about abortion rights and where safe abortions can be accessed. Let's all support our women, especially young girls, and educate them about safe abortions. Thank you.
Ngiyabonga. Nyalo ngitawucela lilunga lehloniphekile lehlangano kaKhongolose uma linako lelingakusho. Nina bekunene kukhona lofuna kuphakamisa sincomo. Yebo Nkosi.
The ANC congratulates and commends the partnership between the Department of Water and Sanitation and the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research to enhance service delivery to those who lack access to water. The Department of Water and Sanitation and the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research have partnered to complete a project on the validation and verification of water users. While the initial primary purpose of this work was to determine existing lawful use of national water resources, this project also formed a critical basis for other aspects of water management, such as macro and micro water resource planning, water allocation reform, water use compliance, monitoring, and enforcement. This venture is another way where the ANC-led government is working towards ensuring fair and reliable access to water for all. I thank you.
Ngiyabonga nine bekunene malunga lahloniphekile manginicele Nkosi yami ukuthi nikusebenzise lokhu lokufakwe emadlebeni ukuthi nive nyasikhuluma lelulwimi loluvumelekile kule ngabathi nyalo ngibonile nje ukuthi abangivanga labanye benu tu ayike ngiyabonga sengitohle cela ke nyalo umhlonishwa lohloniphekile weIFP.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. Indeed, Malbongwe. The King Cetshwayo District Municipality is currently in the process of hiring a candidate into the position of the municipal manager, the one and only Mrs. Mbali Ndlovu. This comes as a shock to many, particularly because in her previous employment as Umhlatuze Municipality Deputy Municipal Manager, Corporate Services, allegations of misconduct were made against her, and she underwent an investigation in this regard. Albeit she was technically exonerated of these allegations, her reputation has nonetheless been tainted since. Honorable House Chairperson, earlier this year, the procurement in the municipality approved of buses that were meant for the District Mayoral Cup, which never set. Instead, the ANC games set, and this was during the by-election that was in the Mtonjanen municipality. The head of procurement in this municipality where this candidate is supposed to be employed is actually Mr. Ndlovu, who is husband to the candidate. Council has approved of the candidates under the leadership of the ANC, a candidate who failed to deliver in her previous position as deputy, yet the council saw her fit to hold the greater position of the municipal manager in the district. We call on the minister to investigate this conflict of interest, for it is in the public interest to do so. Thank you.
Ngiyabonga lilunga lihloniphekile nyalo ngitawucela lilunga lihloniphekile le-NFP.
Thank you, House Chairperson. The matter of aging and crumbling infrastructure in our cities, suburbs, towns is a very serious one. Our roads get worn out and remain in a state of disrepair for a long time. Potholes stay uncovered for a long time. Sometimes those who are tasked with these jobs do a shabby one. At one point, both pedestrians and vehicle users alerted us to a road between Izinkwala and Daniel that had a big hole and had been in this state of disrepair for a long time. The R66 road, the road that takes us to Tonjaneni, goes via Ngwalini, Ndundulu, has had a lot of accident. There is a cry for some drastic measures to be taken, for we cannot afford to lose lives every year. Whilst most metros and other local municipalities dumping sites are not fenced, and children usually play around them and end up picking up used and dangerous elements like needles and inject themselves and catch a lot of diseases. Sometimes they drink poisonous stuff and are contaminated. In some towns, schools and clinics have water pipes for drinkable water which contains toxic waste, and people end up drinking all toxic elements. In most towns, electricity poles and cords remain bare or uncovered and pose a death trap for children and adults. Some government buildings are in a state of repair and electric wires remain uncovered for a long time, thus posing a danger when there are thunderstorms. Thank you very much.
Ngiyabonga, ngicela ilunga lohloniphekile kenyalo likaKhongolose.
Ngiyabonga Mdula Stulo. The ANC congratulate all 15 women awarded new research chairs that are funded by Department of Science and Technology under South Africa Research Chairs Initiative Program recently. To date, 216 research chairs have been awarded and 203 are operational in various disciplines and research fields at South African public universities and national research facilities. While the SACHI has been successful in retaining leading South African researchers and attracting leading foreign researchers to South Africa, the initiative has not been as successful in ensuring racial and gender equity. For instance, of the operational researchers, females comprise 37%, while blacks are underrepresented, collectively accounting for only 27%. The addition of these 15 Department of Science and Technology and NRF chairs will increase the number of awarded chairs from the current 216 awarded to 234 chairs. This will also see an increase in the number of female chairs from the current 80, which is 37% operational chairs, to 95%, 95, which is 41% female chairs. I thank you.
Lilunga lohloniphekile lekho.
Thank you, Chairperson. The crisis in the issuing of TVET certificate and trade tests is hampering the ability of our youth to find gainful employment and, in other instances, result in the exploitation in the workplace, where employers refuse to acknowledge qualifications obtained in the absence of requisite certificates. Letters with results from institutions are not accepted. Now, Chair, this unacceptable problem that causes anguish and hardship goes back more than a decade, in some instances as far back as 2007. I have personally spoken about this on more than 4 occasions. And despite reassurance that the decade-long backlog had been attended to, we continue to receive multiple reports from frustrated, anxious, and angst-ridden students and families alike. Is this what one could expect from a caring and people-centered government? Is this aligned to the values and principles espoused in Chapter 10 of our Constitution of a high standard of professionalism, of efficiency, and of a development-orientated and accountable public administration? To just give you an example, Chairperson, qualified tradesmen is still being paid the salary of an apprentice electrician, apprentice plumber 2-3 years later because they have not received their certificates. Thank you.
Siyabonga, lilunga lohloniphekile likaKhongolose.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The African National Congress expressed concern about high number of Africans detained abroad on variety of charges, predominantly drug-related. Recently, a male South African citizen has been sentenced to death in Vietnam. The man was arrested and charged with drug smuggling in 2016, and the sentence has been handed down this year. We are pleased that the Department of International Relations is rendering consular support to the family of the man. The department committed itself in taking to lead from the concerned citizen with regard to the possibility of appealing the sentence. There are currently 800 South Africans serving sentences in foreign jails. The ANC support Minister Lindiwe Sisulu's call on South Africans traveling abroad to familiarize themselves with the legal and cultural practice of countries they are visiting.
Thank you. DA.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, but this has not saved it from the socialist policies of Chavez and the Maduro governments. Venezuela's GDP was once on par with countries such as Norway. Now, under socialist rule, its inflation is estimated to reach 1 million% by December this year. It may even break the record set by Zimbabwe in 2007, where prices of food in shops doubled every 24 hours. Chavez began with the undermining of democracy and state control over the economy. His populist policies sparked illegal land invasions, the nationalization of land and businesses. The lack of private individual property rights immediately cut off foreign investment. Taxes increased to compensate this, but the ever-present corruption finally ensured that 2 million Venezuelans are now rummaging through dustbins looking for food. Honorable Malema led a delegation to admire Venezuela in 2010. Their red berets are similar to those worn by the Chavistas. And now the ANC is hurtling down the same populist road with land expropriation without compensation. Wherever these policies have been tried, they fail. The Democratic Alliance condemns illegal land invasions and opposes expropriation without compensation. Don't drive our people into further poverty.
Thank you very much. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Ngicela ilunga elihloniphekile le EFF.
Yeah, it's the white supremacists that are imposing sanctions on Venezuela. The Department of Science and Technology is failing the young black scientists and inventors of our country. Malusi Ntuli, a young man who has invented a brilliant electric engine, was used and exploited by the Department of Science and Technology through misleading agreements and contracts. The department has paraded Mr. Ntuli as an example of how they support young scientists, but till today they've done nothing for him. In May this year, after we raised this issue, the minister promised that the government would support him. 4 months later, there has been no progress, and Mr. Ntuli is still tied to a department that wants to claim his successes, but has done nothing to assist him. Young black people continue to be failed by this government. The department and the minister must explain why they refuse to support Mr. Ntuli and his project while continuing to claim his success and invention as their own. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ilunga elihloniphekile kwaKhongolose.
Chairperson. At the end of August.
Honorable Mabaso, can you take a seat? The other member is order. Proceed, Honorable Member.
On the 22nd of August 2018, the Department of Science and Technology successfully hosted the annual South African Women in Women Science Awards. The awards were renamed from the Women in Science Awards Visa to South African Women in Science Awards SAVISA, in order to avoid confusion with Water Institute of Southern Africa, WISA, an institution that bears the same acronym. The South African Women in Science Awards reward and celebrate excellence of women in science and research. The awards have increased in stature since their inception in 2003 and have also become an important part of celebrating women during Women's Month. This year's awards were held under the name 100 Years of Albertina Sisulu, Women United in Moving South Africa Forward. The establishment of the Albertina Sisulu Saki Chair in Nursing Care was in honor of Mama Sisulu, who trained as a nurse, and the renaming of DST Fellowship Awards to DST Albertina Sisulu Fellowships. This year's award also saw an introduction of a commemorative Meerkat Award to celebrate the launch of Meerkat. It rewards and celebrates a distinguished woman in astronomy who is nominated by the South African
Thank you
Radio.
very much, Honorable Member. Your
Thank
time
you
is
so
up.
much.
Lilunga lelihloniphekile leyakhang. Baye kuphi ebekunene? Kude abekho. Sitawucela ke lilunga lelihloniphekile kaKhongolose. Yebo.
Mutsamu Washtulu, at the end of August, the President of the Republic of South Africa, Comrade Ramaphosa, accompanied by Premier Mathabate and a team of strong ministers, Minister Nkwane Mashabane, Hanekom, Zulu, Mulewa, and Deputy Minister Matale, and King Ramabulana of Bavenda, launched an intergovernmental initiative in Hamatsila village in Vembe, where the collaboration of public-private partnership was on show. Government partnered with traditional leaders and NGOs in advancing rural economy. This collaboration opens up the value chain in agriculture, wildlife economy, environmental promotion, and biodiversity economy, arts and culture in the promotion of economic and social development. The launch of the enterprise incubation program of the Department of Small Business and the Department of Environmental Affairs Wildlife Project at Matsila Village. This community has been awarded 10 million rands funding from Enterprise Incubation Program. They also benefit 4.5 million from Shared Enterprise Infrastructure Fund. The Matsila community applied and was granted a game donation by Sun Parks. And that led to the establishment of the wildlife economy. The objectives of the program include, amongst others, collaboration is strength.
Sitawucela ilunga lelihloniphekile le-DA.
Ngiyabonga Sihlalo. The DA has once again held its own in yesterday's municipal by-elections, but this time with one important difference. The DA has taken yet another small town ward off the ANC. In Ngwate, the DA retained the seats, and in Tshwane, the DA grew its share of the votes. The Tshwane seat was one where the election analyst Davy Scholz said shows a steady decline in the ANC share of the votes from 93% in 2011 to just 62% yesterday. He says that shows the ANC position in Tshwane continues to worsen. Fresh from our seizure of an ANC ward in Walter Sisulu municipality in the Eastern Cape last month comes news of the DA victory over the ANC in Ward 2 in Nala municipality in the Free State. In Ward 2, the DA grew from 28% in 2016 to 48% yesterday and took the seats off the ANC. These results show that voters have had enough of ANC misgovernance and are seeing that the DA delivers honest and effective governments. Even outsourcing its policy direction and development to the EFF has not been enough to save the ANC from the voters.
Lilunga lelihloniphekile likaKhongolose. Honourable Member.
Chairperson, the Public Service Month, which is in September, serves to honour men and women who serve our nation with pride, dignity and commitment. During the launch of 2018 Public Service Month in Tshwane, Minister Ayanda Dlodlo reminded the public servants to put public interest first in the execution of their official duties as per Regulation 11B. They must also be committed through timely service to the development and upliftment of all South Africans as per Regulation 12E. As the ANC, we agree and we are calling upon the public servants to use Public Service Month to honour the legacy of both former President Mandela and Masisulu by inculcating the Batupeli values when providing services to our people. Every day, as we execute our responsibilities, we must ensure that we act professionally, we conduct ourselves ethically, we are corruption-free, and we respect the law. Public Service Month is one of the most critical flagship programs of our country across the three spheres of government. In the State of the Nation address early this year, President Cyril Ramaphosa made a clarion call to public servants to adhere to the Batupili principles by putting our people first. As a service delivery improvement program, the Public Service
Honourable
Month is
Member,
an...
thank you very much. Your time is up. Can you please assist the member to see that the time is up?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ya lo malunga lahloniphekile alendlu yesishayamthetho sesifikelele ekupheleni kwetincomo netitatimende tamalunga. Ngitawucela ke nyalo uma kukhona bongqongqoshe labafisa kuphendvula kuletincomo tamalunga baphakamise tandla. Nginicela ke bongqongqoshe ukuthi ningisikisi nje kuphela. Ngiyabonga. Ngitocela, thank you very much. Landes, ngiyabonga baba. Ngitawucela ke nyalo ngqongqoshe wemnyango wasomashishini labancane lilunga uNdabezitha.
Ngiyabonga kakhulu, Chairperson. I would like to thank Honorable Mabasa for the comments, and I would like to also thank the King of Vavenda, King Tony Mpepu Ramabulana, and Chief Livwani Matsila for having engaged and worked with us in making sure that the project succeeds. But I would also like to request the communities to protect the projects which we went to launch so that these projects end up being a benefit to the communities. We are saddened to hear the news, Honorable Chair, that the guest house where we stayed during this was gutted by fire this afternoon, and we will check what happened with it, and we feel sorry for the Matsila community. However, we also would like to call on other government departments, Parliament and others to utilize guest houses and small hotels in our community so that small and medium enterprises can grow. In conclusion, also would like to ask all departments to continue paying SMMEs on time and also implement the 30% procurement. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Ngitawucela ke lisekela ngqongqoshe lomnyango wemandi. Magechwet. Mandi, it's water. Nitawusifunza Siswati nina?
Am I allowed to answer 2 questions?
You have got 2 minutes. If you manage all 2 in 2 minutes, it's okay.
Okay. Let me start by saying there is nothing like Abortion Day. The Women's Global Network for Reproductive Rights declared 28 September an international day. So we have nothing. The difference is here they are saying safe, international safe. There's nothing like abortion. And I want to say to you, on Tuesday, the Minister of Health has an amendment to change the name International Abortion Day to Choice on Termination of Pregnancy. So, which means amakhosikazi ane choice xa behlukunyezwa akwazi ukuzikhethela uba bafuna uthini. Eyesibini, I want to thank Honorable Mnguni. Yes, indeed, the collaboration between Department of Water and Sanitation and the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research was launched this year. We appreciate the collaboration as this is designed to take service delivery to another level by using innovation and working in an integrated way to resolve water and sanitation challenges in our society. This is the duty of the African National Congress to ensure that people have access to clean water and equitable access water. I thank you.
Siyabonga sekela ngqongqoshe ngicele
Chair, on a point of order.
What is the point of order, Honorable
The minister is not saying what I said. I said they must teach people about safe abortions, not anything about
Thank
choice and
you.
everything. About safe abortions, you must listen.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Masilalelane indlu yesishayamthetho. Nyalo sengitocela bongqongqoshe bami bo minister masivaneni Nkosi yami. Ngitocela ke nyalo ngqongqoshe walomnyango lwabahamba phasi kuthiwa bongcothoza. Ngicele litsatsi duba.
I thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Also, I want to thank the Honorable Member for raising issues of Public Service Month. We want to say that the relevance of this month, which is the Public Service Month, is to instill and rebuild good ethics and professionalism in how public servants do their work. Also is to recommit and rededicate the public servants to the principles of Batupele. Again, this month, we also want to improve the morale and inculcate a sense of pride of being a public servant. And lastly, to improve service delivery by exposing senior and middle managers to the cold face of service delivery points to identify challenges and develop plans for corrective action and interfacing with the citizens. We call upon members of parliament and citizens to join forces with government during this Public Service Month by participating in all public service activities and programs with a view to appreciate our government employees, which will in turn serve to encourage and lift up the quality and standard of our government employees' delivery for public good and service. I thank you.
Siyabonga. Nyalo ngitocela lisekela likaNgqongqoshe lomnyango wetekuxhumanisa tsine bala ingabadi yaseNingizimu Afrika kanye nalamave langaphandle sakhe buhlobo Mnumzane Landis. Ngitsite mnumzane.
Honorable Chair, thank you for the opportunity, and I want to thank the Honorable Member for raising the issue. I was in Vietnam a week ago, only to receive the very disturbing news of the imprisonment of a South African national in that country. And his offense was being a drug mule, to put it bluntly. Now, in terms of the laws of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, Honorable Chairperson, a convicted person has 15 days in which to appeal his or her conviction. That 15-day period has as yet not expired, and assuming that the South African national does appeal, that appeal must be heard, and depending on the outcome of the appeal, the Honorable Minister of International Relations, the Honorable Lindiwe Sisulu, has given us the assurance that then and only then will consideration be given to providing further consular assistance to the person concerned. Thank you.
Siyabonga. Ngitocela kokugcina Ngqongqoshe womnyango wokuthuthukiswa kwezomnotho. Mnumzane Patel. Ngqongqoshe Patel. EP.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Thank you very much to Honorable Basoni for the comments about the Delft South Primary School, which was opened recently. It's a school that can house 1,500 children, and it's part of a bigger story around infrastructure delivery. In this case, collaboration between national government through the ASIDI program and provincial government. And in this particular school, it has a computer and science lab, a library, and a nutrition center. And as part of a much bigger program, honorable members, in the last 4 years, 162 new schools have been opened across the country, and 307 schools have been replaced, many of them mud schools, informal schools, broken schools. These are examples of renewing the education system, the absolute foundation of sustainable growth. It's when we see young people being able to access a computer, learning the basics, maths, science, that we know we're really investing in the economy. Honorable Kubisa cautioned us about some of the problems and challenges of implementation at local level with infrastructure. The point is well made, and we need to ensure that we in fact capacitate municipalities. One of our ideas now, Honorable Kubisa, is to use national agencies like Sanral and others to help with road maintenance and with the delivery at local level. Thank you very much.
Siyabonga. Sibonge ke kongqongqoshe beminyango ngetimpendulo tabo letincomekayo. Nyalo ke sesiya esigabeni sekugcina mangatiphatha kahle nje nidoshe ngiphume. Ngisho ukuthi lesitokwena nyalo tiphakamiso akufuneki tibetinze ngoba sithi sitokwendani sifuna lendlu yeneni lokulandzelako hayi info lenze nina bekunene ngidocela ke nyalo lilunga likakhongolose liqale nje lithi qaphu qaphu. An ANC member who wishes to give a motion?
Yes.
Honorable member.
I move on behalf of the...
Order. Order. Honorable Paulson.
Yes, House Chair, thank you very much. There were at least 3 member statements relating to science and technology, and there's been no response to it. Where's the Minister of Science and Technology? Is she doing a manicure or something?
Lunga lehloniphekile uPaulson ngiyabonga hlala phansi siyabona sonke ukuthi kude ngqongqoshe lokhona la siyawuthumela umyaleto utova futhi naye phela ukuthi benithini la kulendlu ingako lo mnyango sinalento lekuthiwa yi-YouTube yi-website yeparliament lo ngekho la uva kahle ukuthi besithini futhi uma bengekho utoyibona ebusuku ku408 ngitomcela ke nje nami ukuthi akuphendvule wena wekunene ngoba impela nje uphatheke kabi. Ngiyabonga. What I'm trying to say is, honorable member,
that is out of order. You are elected to come and represent.
Order, honorable member. That matter you can raise it appropriately with the Speaker's office so that she can raise it with the leader of government business. Thank you very much. But my Swati, I'm sure usive kahle ngikunje uphendvule. Can I now ask the DA? Sengito ngicela futhi funeka nisifunze leSwati.
Oh, no.
Sorry, the ANC hasn't finished. Honorable member.
Thank you, Chair. I move on behalf of the African National Congress that in its next sitting, the House debates the importance of South Africa positioning itself as a destination of choice for astronomy. I thank you.
Thank you, DA.
Thank you, House Chair. On behalf of the Democratic Alliance, at the next sitting of this House, I shall move that this House debate the report of the Interministerial Task Team, IMTT, on the Northwest Province, and further debate the outcomes of stakeholders' engagements, including the findings on visits taken in the Northwest Province by the IMTT to ensure implementation in terms of Section 101A and Section 101B for the effective Northwest Provincial Departments under administrations. I thank you.
Siyabonga, EFF.
Thank you, House Chair. I rise on behalf of the Economic Freedom Fighters and move that in its next sitting, the House debates the establishment of a state-owned construction engineering company to drive infrastructure development and maintenance in South Africa. I so move.
ANC.
On behalf of the ANC, that in its next sitting, the House debates ensuring that research and development in the country is enhanced.
IFP.
House Chairperson,
I hereby give notice that I shall move on behalf of the Inkatha Freedom Party that this House, at its next sitting, debate the state of readiness of SASSA and SAPO to pay out grants as from 1 October 2018 without the help of CPS, following the AG's warning that the grant system is very unlikely to function effectively and efficiently. I so move.
NFP.
Thank you, House Chairperson. At the next sitting of this House, I shall rise and move on behalf of the National Freedom Party that this House debates the matter of health and safety in mines and surrounding areas and emergency measures that are taken to save mine workers and the people residing in the proximity of mines in case of a heavy blast. I so move.
ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would like to move on behalf of the African National Congress that in the next sitting of the House, they must debate the introduction of a worker empowerment component in the policy framework to promote share ownership among workers and to provide for worker representatives sitting on the boards of companies. I so move.
UDM.
Say United Democratic Movement mhlala ngaphambili nawu uthethe iswati.
Yebo.
Siphakama apha sisithi kwinhlanganiso elandelayo lendluso mthetho makushukuxwe ingxaki ezivelelwa ngamakhosi ngakumbe emakhaya abangakwazi ukuzisa kuze shukuxwe apha ngaphambili. Nditsho ngolo hlobo. Siyabulela.
Enkosi. FF Plus. DA.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I rise on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that in this next sitting, this House debates the alleged falsified sewer infrastructure upgrade reports from Chief Albert Lutuli Municipality and the SAPS in Carolina's poor attempt to investigate case 9906-2016 brought against the municipality for its excessive pollution. Thank you.
EFF.
I rise on behalf of the Economic Freedom Fighters and move that in its next sitting the House debates using the compulsory school subject history to bring about cultural restoration and develop a South African national identity. I so move.
ANC.
Ndiyadzinginya ndo imela ANC uri kha dzulo la ino nnḓu ḽi tevhelaho nnḓu i davhidzane nga u dzhielwa nṱha tshanduko ya u advertiser u ṱuṱuwedza tshanduko kha zwa vhudavhidzano u itela vhuḓipfi ha lushaka vhu dzhielwe nṱha na u lwa uri vhathu vhane vha vha dzikhunzi kha zwa vhudavhidzano zwi fhele. Ndi khou livhuwa.
COPE. ACDP. ANC.
I move on behalf of the
Honourable
ANC.
Member. Honourable Drechan is already on the floor.
Okay.
Please close your mic. Please close your mic.
I move on behalf of the ANC that in the next sitting, the House debates measures used to counter the operations of the foreign organized crime syndicates in South Africa and in the region. I thank you.
Thank you. AIC. Nchais.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. I hereby move on behalf of the African Independent Congress that this House in its next sitting debates the plight of the EPWP workers and the possible solutions to their plight. I so move.
Ahang SA. Yeah, Shonabi. ANC. Honourable Member, now you can.
Thank you, Chairperson. I move on behalf of the ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates preventing the increase of human trafficking and the use of young women as drug mules. I so move.
Thank you. APC. PAC. DA.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, on behalf of the Democratic Alliance, at the next sitting of this House, I shall move that this House debates the corruption in the extended public works program with an emphasis on illegally appointed beneficiaries and transparent appointment of beneficiaries by ensuring proper internal control systems are developed and implemented.
ANC.
Ndza susumeta ndzi yimele vandla ra ANC leswaku eka ntshamo lowu landzelaka huvo yi njhekanjhekisana hi the rise of the number of people murdered due to the escalation and proliferation of unlicensed guns in our communities. Nakens.
Nakens. Nyalo ke ninebekunene nitiphathe kahle sesifinyelele esiphethweni saleti phakamiso netincomo ningakhuleka ke niye emakhaya. Thank you very much. The House is adjourned.